Toledo is expected to talk, as well as Toledo Police Chief George Krall. This is a ceremony that blends Officer Dia's Islamic faith, so you are hearing those Islamic prayers right now, and you are seeing that mixed in with this Toledo police tradition. Now, the Honor Guard, as I was saying, helps to plan and coordinate these ceremonial aspects and logistics of the service, including the casket watch. Those are the two gentlemen you see there on the front and the end of the casket. They include the pallbearers and the color guard. There is some training needed for this, for these who stand guard and who carry and fold the flag that will be ultimately presented to Officer Dia's family. I want to bring in two of our anchors and reporters here this morning who have much experience here in the Toledo area covering these sorts of things, police issues, and like I spoke of, some of the previous funerals that we've seen here throughout these years. Let's touch base right now with my co-anchor, Tim Miller, and our reporter, Lou Abear, who can give us some more perspective on this. Really remarkable here to see all of this tradition, officers coming from around the state, and that is because when a police officer dies in the line of duty, that police officer is entitled to the highest honors during a funeral.
So what is your plan?
Right, Melissa, and Officer Anthony Dia certainly getting that today. It's just been amazing to see all the police officers, firefighters walking in outside, but Lou and I have been just glued to our monitor here, watching officers walk up to the caskets and paying their respects, saying prayers, lots of hugs as well, Lou. And as you know well, it's been 13 years, certainly not long enough since we've lost a Toledo officer in the line of duty, Detective Keith Dressel, as Melissa said. Some of those same feelings coming back today, I think.
Yeah, you know, and no matter how, long the separation is, again, every time you see this and you experience this, and as we watch this today, and I'm sure for everybody else, it's it reopens those old pains that you had. And I know Lorraine Dressel, for example, Keith's mother, quoted recently as saying when she woke up on Saturday morning and heard the news, that she said she had felt like she had been kicked in the stomach, that it was just one of those, it was just like reliving the horror that she went through in 2007 when her son was killed. So,
and talking to Oregon Police Chief Mike Navarre a couple of hours ago, he was, of course, Toledo Police Chief back when Detective Dressel was killed. He said he had seen Danielle Dressel inside. Of course, she went through this 13 years ago, and we just know that the family, a wife and two young boys, they are there this morning. Can only imagine what they're going through. But seeing all this support, Lou, together, we know it's helping the family in this tough time.
It really, I think, does, and that was one thing Lorraine and I believe Chief Navarre has mentioned as well, is that as the community comes together, and they really do. I mean, Frank Stiles wrote a book a number of years ago, former Toledo policeman, called City Soldiers, and talked about how these are our representatives. These are our uniformed representatives for a city. They're part of who we are, and we come together as a community. Unfortunately, too often when these types of incidents happen. But this is what we're experiencing. Seeing this morning and witnessing today is the community coming together, not just police officers, but people from all across the community and the area who are touched by what has happened here.
And recently you had put a story together on some of the other line of duty deaths Toledo police have seen over the recent years. Before Keith Dressel, there were others, and you have to think that those family members, those that are still with us, have to be thinking the same thing. It's not just the most recent one or the one before that. This goes back more than 100 years, unfortunately.
Right. And and I usually have been to a number of the memorial services they hold every May for officers who've died in the line of duty here in Toledo. Down at the Civic Center, they have a special memorial area for them. And, you'll find family members who will come to that memorial service who maybe lost someone 100 years ago or 90 years ago, and there are still family members that grieve and think about that to this day. Just a quick aside, one of those was George Zentera, who was killed and gunned down in 1928. I had the opportunity to speak to one of his sons who was in his 90s when I talked. His son was 4 years old.
Wow.
And there are pictures of him at the funeral, which was held, and they used to hold funerals at the family homes for these officers.
In the homes, right.
This was on Tecumseh Street where Gentera lived, and, you know, and he talked about it, you know, 80-some years later.
Wow.
And still was overwrought with emotion, even at, you know, from remembering it from those many decades.
And you mentioned the police memorial there downtown. Family members who maybe didn't know that loved one are taken there to learn about them, to maybe make that connection. This was the sacrifice they made, and they'll be honored there for a lifetime.
Yeah, as well they should be, and that's the thing that we really come to understand when these things happen. Unfortunately, sometimes, you know, we don't think about it. We go out about our day-to-day lives. We go on thinking, you know, we see a police officer, we respect the badge and we respect them, but to really understand these men and women who put on the uniform, they really are human beings. They have stories, they have families, and this really brings it home as we see the family here in the front row, and those people who knew Officer Dia on a, you know, much more personal level, and you see them coming out here and how their lives are now affected as they're left without a father or a brother. Or
so many
husband.
family members here, and his widow there, Jamie, being greeted there as well. And, you know, any little bit of comfort that can be added, hopefully will add on. We know in talking to our Zainab Shaib, there is a 40-day period of mourning in the Muslim faith that began when Officer Dia lost his life. That will continue. And she described the service that's coming up to me this way. It'll be full of a lot of sadness, which you would expect. But she said he deserved. She knew him. Her family knew Officer Dia. She said he deserved this outpouring today.
Yeah, and everything I've read about him, and I did not know the man, but I feel like I've gotten to know him, and you know, everything I've seen about him. What an incredible individual he must have been, because he touched so many lives in such a positive way.
And Lou, these are obviously tough times for law enforcement. We have a situation in Minneapolis, and we know there are so many calls for police reform, and we heard Anthony Dia's father speaking out so much about this in the past couple days, especially yesterday. You know, maybe there's not a time for discussion of that today, but it is a difficult time to be in law enforcement, and this reinforces it. But you know, the officers that are here mourning, and those from other departments that have come in, they're dealing with their own fears, aren't they? And then they see the reality of what can happen.
Well, exactly, and I think it's these incidents that sometimes bring it home and put it into a different focus for all of us to understand these jobs are dangerous. These jobs are really dangerous. They encounter life and death situations every day when they pull over a car, they pull over a suspect, or they're talking to someone. And as you go through some of the stories historically, and you see these similar situations, that this wasn't the first time this happened, where a police officer in Toledo went to talk or investigate a suspect, and they, for whatever reason, you know, pulled a gun.
There are no routine calls, and you can be as prepared as possible, and he was able to fire back at the suspect. But so that is the scene inside right now here at Savage Arena. As Melissa, you continue to see police officers go up and pay their respects at the casket. Obviously, this was scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock. It is no doubt it has not technically started yet, because, Melissa, so many people want to go up and pay their respects.
Yes, and thousands of police officers and law enforcement have come from all over the state, guys. I want to talk a little bit about some of the traditions that are bestowed upon an officer who is killed in the line of duty. We're talking about the highest honor, and these police funerals really kind of represent a few things: honor, service, and gratitude. It's a really meaningful send-off, which kind of bonds together the police department and their families after an unspeakable tragedy. And I think, Tim, you interviewed Police Chief Mike Navarre over in Oregon this morning, who was the police chief when Detective Keith Dressel was killed back in 2007. He said this is now a family forever, that the Toledo Police Department is now bonded with Officer Dia's family. And it's really a chance to celebrate, not only mourn, but to celebrate this officer's service. and his dedication to the community.
Right, and that will be so important in not only the days to come here, the hours that are ahead, the tough times for the family, but for years to come. I can remember, Lou, the Dressel family, you know, police stuck to them very closely too with their children, and I'm sure that relationship has continued. And you've done a lot of work with the police museum. I can only imagine, as we see we believe the family going up there, I can only imagine the bond that officers have now with this family. They'll probably all want to help in some way, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's exactly. That's one of the things that I noticed when I worked at the police museum, as I got to know more officers, and the solemn obligation they felt towards those officers who had died in the line of duty. That there was a real bond. Yes, not just with the officer involved, but with the families, and
Right.
the families would sometimes come into the museum, and it was like everything stopped.
So you've seen families
Yes,
come in that
absolutely.
want to learn more and remember.
Right.
And
right.
it looks like
So that's
Jamie Dia is approaching the casket right now. We believe we just saw the young boys. There she is at the casket. And the honor guard just switched out casket watch. And there she is putting her forehead on the casket along with his father, Yunus. She's tapping the casket as she has a moment there with her husband in front of the Savage Arena. Just 3 days ago, he was alive. Their family was intact. It's just so tragic to see this very young mom here with 2 children, now without a father. And we see more people who appear to be close to the family or family members that are sobbing at this casket right now. And in the Muslim faith, burials traditionally happen within the first 24, or the Islamic faith, I should say, happen within the first 24 hours. So we're now 3 days in. It is a little bit longer because this was an unusual circumstance. There had to be an investigation and an autopsy. So usually the mourning period is over. We're now at 3 days, and this family is doing this. They're thrust into this very public spotlight right now.
They sure are, Melissa, and you know, a lot of situations like this, it seems, you know, families don't want to be shown. They obviously are okay with that in this situation, but you can really feel the emotion there. And it looks like the service is beginning. We can see Police Chief George Krall to the right and the mayor on the left. Melissa?
Yes, we're going to listen in. This is the welcome and the introduction. This really serves as a statement of why everyone has gathered for this officer. Let's take a listen.
The Dia family, friends of the Dia family, Officer Dia's faith community, his classmates, all of Toledo Police, all of Toledo Fire, public servants and police officers from across our community, state, and nation. Anthony was a son, a husband, a daddy, and a police officer. A police officer who had the courage to go where others would not dare, not just on July 4th, but each and every day he took up the badge to protect, to keep people safe, and to do what is right. Anthony's lieutenant, his supervisor, told me that Anthony cared about everybody. He never saw him mad or even frown. Anthony was always willing to serve. His lieutenant said, "I wish I had 50 Anthony Dias on my shift." He was the officer everyone wanted around. Anthony loved his family. He loved his wife and his children. He loved animals, especially pit bulls. He loved Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He loved wrestling and coaching wrestling, so much so that at home he has a professional wrestling mat. I had the privilege of meeting Anthony's dad and stepmom yesterday. They told stories about him, one that I can't repeat. They told me about a night Anthony found a stray pit bull, and even though he was off duty, he picked the dog up and took it to the shelter using the police key so that the dog would have food and water and be safe for the night. 2 hours. 2 hours before Anthony was shot and killed, He met a family as they stopped for ice at a local gas station. Anthony let the young boys sit in his police car and turn on the lights and sirens. The boys' dad took a photo of them with Anthony and posted it online for the world to see how happy he had made his kids. To our knowledge, that was the last picture taken of Anthony Dia, and it was a picture of him serving the community. Anthony's dad told the nation yesterday, "I don't want my son's death to be in vain." In a private meeting, Tony told me that God had a plan for Anthony, and that maybe that plan was to unite the nation and end the war on police officers. The past few months, I'd venture a guess that every police officer in this room and around the country has felt the weight of this badge. We have felt unsupported, we felt targeted, and we felt alone. Anthony has reminded his fellow police officers that we are not alone. To every police officer in this room, look around you. Look outside this building. Look along the procession route at the people lining our streets, waiting for Anthony to pass by. Look at the nation and look across the globe right now as people everywhere watch Anthony's funeral and mourn his death. We are not alone. Anthony's death will never be in vain. He has united people across the world. And even though we all mourn Anthony's death, one of the most important things to remember is that Anthony would not have chosen any other way to leave this life. Anthony's father told the world yesterday, "My son died a hero and wouldn't want to go out any other way." So while it's okay to be upset, to be angry, to cry, when we all go home tonight, we should remember the words of Anthony's dad. He wouldn't want to go out any other way. Jamie, your husband is a hero. Eunice, Matham, your daddy is a hero. Men like Anthony Dia are not common. They are made of integrity, dignity, honor, and courage. We are proud that he wore the patch of this department, and we are humbled by his ultimate sacrifice. As long as his name is spoken, he will never be forgotten. Detective Andre Cowell will now read a poem that he wrote.
Wow, this was much easier in the bathroom in the mirror. I met Tony and Ahmed. I told him I got to tell this story so I could loosen up a little bit. 23 years ago, I met his dad and his uncle. And I got called out to Tony's spot because Ahmed had beat up the DJ. So when I get there, it's Ahmed and Buddy. And I'm talking to Buddy, and Ahmed's over there with that same silly grin on his face. And a car pulls up, and this well-dressed guy gets out, silk shirt, and walks up and punches Ahmed. So I'm trying to separate them two, and Ahmed's like, "No, that's my brother, we're okay." And they all just walk back in the club. I was like, well, this is how it goes. I guess I'm done here. And that started a friendship, many lunches together at the diner. Me, Ahmed, Ali, Hassan, everybody. I played flag football with you guys. You guys are my brothers, and I love you, and I hate that we're here for this, but that's what family's for. This is titled Unit 118. Small in stature, but big in heart, no one could ever replace you. Our brother in blue, gone too soon, say his name is Anthony Dia. Tony was a family man. Jamie, Eunice, and Matham were his all. They stood behind him proudly when he chose policing as his call. A family heart full of joy as he received his badge and took his oath, promising to protect and serve Tony was great at doing both. Always a smile on his face, a kind word for all he met. If you were building a perfect cop, Tony was as close as you could get. Positive, motivated, and ready to help, that's what we all should strive to be. A role model for our youth, Tony represented a diverse community. I'm sure July 3rd started just like any other work night did. Tony said goodbye to his family, kissing his wife, then kissing his kids. Starting his shift, his badge shining, his uniform crisp and clean, he hit on with the dispatcher. Tony is now Unit 118. Patrolling the city call to call, stopping when asked to pose, taking a picture with a couple of kids, that's the Anthony everyone knows. But shortly after that gesture, a call for help was broadcast. Unit 118 en route dispatch. God, why was this call his last? Arriving on scene, our brother was alone, hoping to lend a hand. Tony encountered pure evil, but his ground he did stand. Shots were being fired, our brother wounded on the ground. Tony had been shot, but he kept on fighting, firing round after round after round. Our hearts were completely shattered. Keen his mic, these words flowed from him. Dispatch, Unit 118, tell my family I love them. Lights, sirens, faster, go, go, go. Dear God, please help him, he's all alone. DeCant, Garwich, McClendon, first on scene. We salute your efforts to help bring Tony home. Doctors, nurses working diligently, unable to save his life. A warrior's battle is over. We are now the protectors of his children and wife. A moment we all know is possible each time we start our day. Tony gave his all in the face of evil. It's a price no officer should have to pay. So thank you, Dia family, for letting us love him in a world so cruel and mean. Tony Dia, rest in peace. We'll take it from here. Long live Unit 118. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Mustafa Rahal will now read a letter.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Mustafa Rahal. I'm Anthony's cousin. I want to thank you all for being here today. I will be reading what he titled My Final Words and Will to My Family by Anthony Dia. I'm typing this letter in case one day I do not make it home from work or pass away unexpectedly. If you're reading this, that means I am no longer here. I hope my family can find some solace in this letter. I'll attempt to address all of my loved ones in this letter, as well as my belongings and property. My son Yunus, when I found out your mother was pregnant with you, I was so nervous. I was still just a boy myself and couldn't possibly imagine raising a child. Prior to you being born, I got a job on my 18th birthday. It was hard work, but every day I would show up with the thought of you in mind, motivating me to continue so I could support you. When you were born, it was the greatest thing that had ever happened to me. I truly believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had it planned this way because becoming a father changed me so much for the better. There's so much I want to teach you and your brother, but since you're reading this, I may have not been able to teach you guys all of those things. I'm typing this in the holy month of Ramadan, 2020. This month is a time for reflection, and I've thought a lot about death in this month and being prepared for the end of this journey. Take care of your mother and brother for me. You're the man of the house now. I love you so much, and I'm so proud of you and your brother. You and your brother are the reason I woke up every day and the reason I was where I was in life. My son Matham, you will always be my baby no matter how old you get. Every day you and your brother make me laugh and bring me so much joy to my life. Please look after your mother as well. She would need you and Eunice during this time. I want you to know that I'm also so proud of you. You are so smart and caring for others. You both are so much better than I ever deserved, and I only can thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. May you both please forgive me for any shortcomings I had. I know I wasn't always the best dad, and maybe I've been harder on you both than I should have. I hope our good times together far outweigh any of the bad times. My sons, my advice for you is this. Hold tight to the rope of Allah and the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Do your prayers every day and maintain your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Islam. Continue in your entire life to be a Shia of Ali alayhi salam. As you were both born with this right, which is a blessing not all were born with. Study your religion and keep these books in English I have gathered to learn for you to learn from. Never be ashamed of your faith and state your beliefs. Never be ashamed of your faith and state your beliefs to others with confidence, but also humility. Learn Allah's books and the life of the Prophet Muhammad salawatu wassalam, and the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Maintain relations with your family, even those relatives who do not believe such as us. When you have doubts about your religion or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, pray to Him and study these books, as you will almost always find your answer to your questions from these. I pray you go to college and get some sort of degree. I also pray for you to each have a family of your own and also have children of your own. Your mother would love to be a grandma. I pray you raise your children on the same principles and faith I have raised you, but also with the humor and playfulness we always had. I love you both with everything in me. My wife, Jamie, we have been through so much together. You were the best wife a man could ask for. Always supporting me in all the things. You never asked for much, but in return you gave your all to myself and our children. You are truly the love of my life, and I know I did not tell you that as much as I probably should have. I apologize for my shortcomings and hope you forgive me. Please continue to raise our children on the right path. We may not be perfect, but I don't think we're doing too bad. I hope you can be happy in this dunya. I hope you get to become a grandmother and live a long, happy life after I am gone. I'm sure that sounds impossible right now, but maybe in time, I pray. I love you and our sweet boys with everything in me. I'm sorry that I'm gone sooner than I wanted to be. Every soul shall taste death, and this is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted me to return. I love you so much. My mother and father, you guys were the best parents I could ask for. Baba, you were like Superman to me growing up. I looked up to you always. You were my real life superhero. Mom, you were always there for me when I needed you. You both were. I hope you both forgive me for all the headaches and pain I caused you both when I was growing up. I love you so much. My siblings, Layla, I know I never say it, but I love you. You are a great sister and an even better aunt. Forgive me for being a jerk sometimes when you were younger. Ali and Haidar, I love you both. Stay close with Eunice and Matham. You guys are all growing up together. It's so amazing to see. I hope that maybe if I passed away at work, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I hope that maybe if I passed away at work, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive me and accept me amongst the martyrs. Every day I put on the uniform, it was the intention to protect the weak and innocent in my community from evil. I also hope that if I was shot, I was able to take the shooter with me. I hope I died with bravery. Please recite Surat Yasin at my grave, and please pray that Allah forgives me for my sins. I lived a fulfilling life and have accomplished all anyone could ask for. I have no complaints and thank Allah every day for what He has blessed me with. I could go on and on in this letter to my loved ones, but I'll stop here. I hope with time this gets easier for you all. Lastly, for my property, I leave everything I own to my wife, Jamie Dia. May she distribute it as she sees fit. Please make sure the boys get the books and academics and anything else they may ask for mine. This is not our final goodbye. I know that one day we will all see each other again. But until then, I'll ask Allah to let me visit you all as much as possible and watch over you as much as I can. From Allah we come, and to Allah we shall return. I had written something up for Anthony on his behalf. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be with you all. I want to personally thank you all on behalf of the Shaheed, Anthony Dia, and his family today for all being here, and the community for coming together and being there for his family through these hard times. I know he would be ever so grateful for all everyone has done. Anthony Dia, let me tell you, he was a man unlike any other I knew. He was a great father, a great husband, a great brother, a great friend, and just such a great human being overall. When I first met Anthony, it was about 2008, 2009, and we were at a family gathering. I was introduced to him. He was my cousin, yet it was my first time meeting him, as some of us has experienced being Lebanese and having huge families. This is nothing out of the usual. Anthony was transferring to Bedford High School, where I was going to be attending. Little did I know that I had just met one of my best friends and someone who's going to change my life completely. If you knew me in high school, you knew the quiet and shy nerdy kid I was. But when he was at Bedford, we were inseparable. If I wasn't at his house hanging out with him, I was on Xbox playing Call of Duty with him, or Halo. I didn't have many friends in high school, but Anthony, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I didn't have many friends in high school, but Anthony was always tried his best and included me in everything, whether it was going out with some friends, his friends, or taking me to get my first bowl of Chipotle or my first Starbucks drink. He always treated me as a brother. We bonded over our love for our culture and fighting and wrestling. Actually, he's the one who convinced me to wrestle in high school, even though I didn't want to, but he was a persistent one. I'm grateful. The one thing that really brought us together, though, was our love for our religion and our Ahl al-Bayt. For those here who do not know what or who Ahl al-Bayt is, it means the family of the house, and by the house, it means the house of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He always had this interest. I'd explain it like a spark that started a fire that grew into a strong, burning flame. But this spark, I believe, helped shape him into the amazing father and police officer and human being that he became, that we all loved and knew. It was his dream to follow in their footsteps and spread peace, love, humility, humbleness, boldness, and integrity. I know it's in their influence that, in fact, guided him along this path to law enforcement. He wanted to protect and guide people through his actions and help those in need. Anthony was someone I've always looked up to, and I wish I got the chance. I wish I got the chance to tell him this to his face, but I know he is here with us right now, so I'll tell him now. Hey, Habibi. I love you, bro. I miss you, and I'm so proud of you. And thank you for everything. We always said, live like Ali and die like Hussein. That was our slogan. For those who know of Ali, know he lived with such vigor and eloquence. And for those who know Hussein, he was the epitome of divine justice, peace, love, mercy, and sacrifice. Anthony, my brother, indeed you have succeeded. Indeed you have succeeded in following in the footsteps of our dearly beloved Ahlul Bayt. Verily to Allah we belong, and verily to Allah we shall return. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I've been reading a lot about the Anthony rule, and for the people in charge around here, I hope you guys really take it into consideration. Thank you so much. Wa alaikum assalam.
Hussein Chouaib will now introduce the Syed.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the most beneficent, the merciful. And may God's blessings and peace and prayers be upon Prophet Muhammad, his pure household, his righteous companion, and the messengers of God from Adam to Noah, to Abraham, to Ismail, to Isaac, to Jacob, to Joseph, to Moses, to Jesus, all of whom we respect and admire. In honor of our hero and beloved and dear Officer Dia, and I don't prefer to use the term fallen because our martyrs and heroes don't fall, they rise. In his honor, let's recite Surah Al-Fatiha, please. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. I'm going to recite a few verses from the Quran in Arabic. Whoever wishes to follow along, it's going to be chapter 76. You could look it up if you like. Chapter 76, verses 5 through 12. If you'd like to follow what I'm reading, because the recitation is going to be in Arabic. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الأبرار يشربون من كأس كان مزاجها كافورا عينا يشرب بها عباد الله يفجرونها تفجيرا يوفون بالنذر ويخافون يوما كان شره مستطيرا ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا إنا نخاف من ربنا يوما عبوسا قمطريرا فوقاهم الله شر ذلك اليوم ولقاهم نضرة وسرورا وجزاهم بما صبروا جنة وحريرا صدق الله العلي العظيم. Our honorable and respected guests, visiting or locals, dear family and friends, we appreciate all of you, all the love, all the support, or all the sincere and heartfelt condolences. Our family truly appreciate that, and we thank you all. Allow me, please, to introduce an Islamic clergy and speaker, the respected and a dear friend, the respected Sayyid Saleh Al-Qazwini. Let's welcome him with a warm welcome, please.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, the Creator and Sustainer of the universe, and the Lord of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. Respected brothers and sisters, Dia family, elected officials, law enforcement, firefighters, I begin by giving you all my condolences on the tragic loss of a dear friend, a hero who has left us and is no longer with us. We're gathered here to commemorate the life of a man who sacrificed his life and gave the ultimate sacrifice on the 4th of July, the day Americans celebrate America and the liberty and everything it stands for. The martyr, Officer Anthony Dia, gave his life on that day, and for that, I give you all my condolences. And we ask Allah, God, to shower His blessings upon the soul, the living soul of our martyr, Officer Dia. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you and his family and anyone who's grieving this loss the patience to endure this loss. From the times that I interacted with Officer Dia, and from what I heard about him from his family, and from what we have all been reading about him and discovering from his life, we came to know that Officer Anthony Dia was a man of God, a man of family, and a man who served his community and his country. And for that, he's a role model for all of us. As Muslims, we take him as a role model. And for all non-Muslims, look at the example of Officer Anthony Dia when you think of a Muslim in your mind. When you think of Islam, think of this man who gave his life on the 4th of July for the sake of the values of the United States. Officer Anthony Dia was a man of God. In a time where many Muslims shy away from showing their faith and showing their religion due to the circumstances of the time, Officer Dia was very proud of his faith. Officer Dia did not shy away from his religion and his values and his culture. And this is what the United States stands for. And this is what we learn from this great man. As soon as he died, I started seeing posts all over social media of friends and relatives and even people who are outside of Toledo, people who are in different countries, posting his picture and saying, "Rest in peace, Officer Anthony Dia." So I saw someone who was not from the United States, someone who was not very involved in the community here. I messaged him and I asked him, "How do you know Officer Dia?" He told me, "I know him very well. We've been talking for years and we've been discussing our faith and our values, and especially the love for the Ahl al-Bayt, the family of the Prophet. And I am inspired every day by the family of Prophet Muhammad and their chivalry and their sacrifice and what they have offered. And this is what keeps me going." And as we have read from his will and his last letter, which he wrote in the month of Ramadan just a few months ago, just a few weeks ago actually. And this shows that he had a sense that he was going to be leaving soon. And this is his way of telling us to prepare and connect with God. Officer Dia was a family man. The last words he uttered, which we all heard, were, "Tell my family I love them. Tell my family I love them." Only a person who is truly dedicated to his or her family would say that, say those words during the final moments, during the final hours, during the final seconds of his life when he has just been shot. These were the words that he thought of. And as part of being a devout Muslim, my dear brothers and sisters, we have to show our love to our family. God expects from us to show our love to our family and our children, our spouses, our parents. And for that, we give our condolences to his family who have lost a treasure. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them the patience to endure this loss and carry on with his legacy. Third, Officer Dia was a man who served his country, a man who served his community, a man who gave back and did not just take for himself. And this is the definition of a good citizen and the definition of a good Muslim as well. As Muslims, we are taught to love the land that holds us, the land that we live on. In a statement from Ali ibn Abi Talib, Imam Ali, he says, خَيْرُ الْبِلَادِ مَا حَمَلَكْ لَا مَا حَمَّلَكْ. The best land is the land that embraces you, not the land that burdens you. Many Muslims and the family of Officer Anthony Hussein Dia migrated to the United States. But today, the Muslims feel that they are a part of the United States. And they are citizens, and they love and they give back to the United States. As Muslims, we are taught to give back to our society, to take care of those who are in need, to help establish a just society where everyone has the freedom, where everyone can prosper. And as a member of the law enforcement, Officer Dia was doing just that. In a hadith, in a tradition by Prophet Muhammad, he says, وَخَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. The best of people in the eyes of God are not necessarily those who are always worshiping and praying. The best people in the eyes of God are those who give back to people, those who others benefit from them, those who others are blessed through them. And this is what Officer Dia was doing, my dear brothers and sisters. So we see that Officer Anthony Hussein Dia fulfilled his duty to his Lord, fulfilled his duty to his family, and fulfilled his duty to his community and his country. And for that, he's a role model for all of us. And these are all lessons that we can take from his life. And we Muslims living in the United States, American Muslims, we have to take him as a role model. And he is also an example of a Muslim for those who have seen the misportrayal of Muslims in the media. Look at Officer Dia. My dear brothers and sisters, we believe that Officer Anthony and all of those who died on the right path while doing good are in a better place. While the body dies, the soul remains. The soul is connected with its creator, the Lord, and therefore the soul remains. And in fact, those who died doing good, those who died in the way of God and serving your country, loving your family, and being a devout believer is in a way of God. Those who died in the way of God are martyrs. And the Quran tells us, do not consider and do not say in chapter 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 154, the Quran says, and do not say about those who are killed in the way of Allah, they are dead. Rather, they are alive, but you perceive it not. And we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and loss of wealth and lives and fruit, but give good tidings to the patient, who, when disaster strikes them, they say, indeed, we belong to Allah, and indeed to Him we will return. Those are the ones upon whom are blessings from their Lord and mercy, and it is those who are the rightly guided. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٌ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ أُولَئِكَ عَلَيْهِمْ صَلَوَاتٌ مِّن رَّبِّهِمْ وَرَحْمَةٌ وَأُولَئِكَ هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ. What gives the believers comfort in times of grief is that we know Officer Dia is alive. And sooner or later, we will catch up with him. Everyone will leave this life eventually, but the souls remain. And Allah says, give glad tidings to the patient ones. In times of loss, we have to be patient and we have to hold on to our faith and our values and what we stand for. And give glad tidings to the patient ones who, when they are afflicted with a tragedy, they say, to Allah we belong and to Him we shall return. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. From an Islamic perspective, death is regarded as a bridge that connects us with the afterlife. And every single one of us, the law of this world, the law of nature dictates that every single one of us will have to sooner or later cross that bridge. And God does not judge us. We will go, after we cross this bridge, we will go to a just, merciful Lord who does not judge us by the color of our skin, by our social status, by the passport that we carry, but by the purity of our hearts and by the legacy that we leave behind. Allah says about the day of judgment, the day of reckoning, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. The only thing that will help you on the day of judgment is not your wealth or your children or what you owned in this life. When we leave behind everything. The only thing we take with us is our values and our faith and what we believed in. And the memory that we leave behind. The day wherein neither wealth nor sons will avail except who returns to Allah with a qalbin salim, with a pure heart. Officer Dia, despite living a short life, martyred and killed at the age of 26, having just joined the law enforcement. He left this life and he lived a very short life, but he left a legacy and he left a memory and is a role model, an example for all of us through his faith, through his family values, and through his dedication to his country and his community. I conclude by reciting Surah Al-Fatiha, the first chapter of the Quran, and I ask you all to pray for him in whatever prayer you know in your heart, and ask God to bless the soul of Officer Dia. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the specially merciful. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, the entirely merciful, the specially merciful, sovereign of the day of recompense. It is you we worship and you we ask for help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those upon whom you have bestowed favor, not of those who have evoked your anger or of those who are astray. Wassalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all.
Toledo Mayor Wade Kepsikevich.
When he was 8 years old, Anthony Dia did what millions of other Americans do on Super Bowl Sunday. He got in front of a TV to watch the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl was between the Patriots and the Rams. And unfortunately, the Patriots won. A lot of 8-year-olds could have been moved by that and decided to back the winner, to be a front runner, to go with the team that won. Anthony Dia was a Rams fan. And it is an insight into his personality, perhaps, that at a moment of excitement on the field, he was drawn to the team that was sad, the team that had lost, the team that was downtrodden. Anthony Dia was a Rams fan not just in that moment. He was a Rams fan his entire life. If you go to social media, in fact, even the pictures that circulated before this service showed he and his family supporting the LA Rams. Pictures of them at games with their children asleep on their laps. Picture of Officer Dia holding the hands of his sons with Rams uniforms as they walked into the stadium. Picture the whole family, including the 2 dogs, wearing Rams jerseys. The point of this is to say 2 things. First of all, Anthony Dia did not turn out to be a Patriots fan, so he's clearly a man of character and high honor. But more to the point, he was loyal. He was loyal his whole life. Sure, he was loyal to his football team, but more important than that, he was loyal to those dogs. He was loyal to those kids. He was loyal to that family. He was loyal to his city. He was loyal to all of us. You can't be loyal without the capacity to love. Only a heart that is full of love has the capacity for loyalty. And so the question is, how loyal are we? How much capacity for love do we have in our hearts? Anthony Dia was not a police officer for 30 years who became a police officer in a different time, in a different era, where police officers were looked upon differently, and I might say perhaps with more respect than they are now. He was an officer just in the last 2 years. In other words, he chose to be a police officer knowing the environment that police officers face. He chose it willingly. He knew what's going on in this country, and he chose to do it anyhow because of his loyalty and his love. What do we do when we see a police officer like Anthony Dia? Do we love him or do we hate him? Are we appreciative? Do we appreciate him or do we vilify him? Too often these days, I think we know the answer to that question. Anthony Dia loved, because the fact of the matter is he was better than us, and he is the best of us. Master, go on, and I will follow thee to my last gasp with truth and loyalty. Shakespeare wrote those words over 400 years ago. Anthony Dia lived them Saturday morning. We've all heard the recording. It's been referenced several times today. In his last gasp, he demonstrated his truth and loyalty. Tell my family I love them. How many books, how many songs, how many movies are based on the premise of give me one more day, give me one more night, give me one more moment? Who knows what we would do in that moment? We know what Officer Dia did. Chief Krall the other day mentioned, and he's right, that the Dia family has lost a son and a husband and a father, but it has gained 600 brothers and sisters, the police family here in Toledo. I might suggest that the Dia family has gained several 100,000 more, because Toledo is a family, and the Toledo family hurts over the loss of our son, our brother. Master, go on, and I will follow thee to my last gasp with truth and loyalty. He was loyal to us. He loved us. Will we be loyal to him? Mother Teresa said that if you want to do something, if you want to promote peace, go home and love your family. Officer Dia is home, and he loved his family. It is our challenge now to honor him properly by loving him. May he rest in peace.
Toledo Police Chief George Krall.
Before I get started, I want to thank my brothers and sisters in the safety forces who have traveled here today to pay respects for Anthony Dia and his family. It's humbling and an honor to see you all here, and I know it means as much to the family as all of us. Again, I want to send my condolences and prayers to Anthony's beautiful wife, Jamie, and those two handsome young men. I can't fathom what you've been going through for the past few days and what you will continue to feel for years to come. But most important, Jamie, I want to say thank you for sharing Anthony with us. We only had him for a short time. In fact, in 12 days, he would have celebrated his 2-year anniversary with us. We've learned through stories, media reports, and through his loving family what an amazing son, husband, father, friend, and police officer Anthony was. And this learning and appreciation will continue as time moves on. And my friends, this was not supposed to happen here. A family is devastated. A city is hurting. My police department is hurting. And we're all trying to understand the whys of this senseless murder. A few days ago, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who is much smarter than me and one of the closest people in my life. We were talking about faith. You know that feeling that you don't see something, you don't understand it, but you know in your heart of hearts there's a reason. God has scripted every moment of our lives until we say goodbye. And I have that faith, and I know the Dia family has that faith as well. We've heard that time and time again today. That morning, Anthony was sent on a check the safety call for service. Just listen to the name of that call, check the safety. He was sent to check the man's safety. All accounts pointed that this person simply had too much to drink. Anthony went there to make sure he was okay. He was there to make sure that he didn't hurt himself or someone else, and Anthony wanted him just to get home. Sadly, he was taken from us by the very man he was trying to help. It doesn't make sense. It was unfair, and it never should have happened. Now, luckily for me, I'm not an elected official, so I can say what I'm about to say. To quote George Orwell, people sleep peacefully in their beds at night only because rough men and women stand ready to do violence on their behalf. Think about that. We take so much for granted in this world. We take it for granted to sleep peacefully in our beds. We take for granted those in law enforcement, like Anthony, who are on the street 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. People forget about those men and women who have made a sacred oath and promise to protect them so others can sleep peacefully in their beds at night. As the mayor said, it takes a special kind of person to do this work, to intentionally put yourself into harm's way. And you know, law enforcement is a balancing act. On this hand, you have to be strong, courageous, tough. And on this hand, you have to be caring, compassionate, loving, and God-fearing. We also must be fearless, unafraid to approach a vehicle with blacked-out windows which could have several armed felons inside, or to run into a burning building to help save a family, or to chase an armed subject into an abandoned building. It is our job to take these wolves off the street. Anthony was all of the above. I spoke with his fellow officers and commanders, and to a fault, they said what an incredible man and police officer he was. Now, for all of us here who are not in law enforcement, you may not understand the reference I'm about to make. Anthony got it. In fact, just bear with me, you're going to hear a little repetition here, but I want to read you what his shift commander, Lieutenant Joe Trudeau, wrote me regarding Anthony. Anthony was the example of a fine officer. He never, and I can say honestly, say the word never, had anything negative to say about anyone or anything. I never saw him with a frown or a bad look on his face. He took every assignment given to him in stride and completed it with the utmost professionalism. He always took time to say hi to people on the street, particularly kids, as he would let them sit in the seat of his police car and turn on the siren, and he would take pictures with anyone asking, as he did a mere 2 hours before he was murdered. The current movement across the United States concerning law enforcement and what type of officer they are deemed is exactly what Officer Dia embodied. I have heard on some calls, for example, transporting a citizen to another destination for their safety. He would call his mother afterward with a heavy concern for the individual, and his mother would even go check on the person to ensure their safety. When I met his family the day after he was killed, I told several of them, and I mean this honestly, if I had 50 Dias on my shift, I would take them all, knowing everything would be done right, with no worries, and we would be a happy shift. I'm proud to say he was on my shift and proud to serve with him. He was truly a great young man that was taken before his time. He has an incredibly strong family who stated to me, and I quote, "He was the happiest he has ever been. This was God's will to take him. He had a plan." Those words are powerful after losing a man of the caliber of Anthony Dia. Finally, I want to assure Jamie and her family that, as the mayor said, you have now 630 adopted brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, snow shovelers, grass cutters, whatever you need, big or small, we are there for you. You're our family. You're part of one big, happy, dysfunctional family, and we will never forget about you. Unit 118 will never be used again by this police department out of respect and honor for Anthony's ultimate sacrifice. Again, I want to thank all of you for coming here today and showing what this community means. It's heartwarming, and I can speak for all the uniformed people here. We will never forget it. Now, I would like to call the Toledo Police Honor Guard, who will now render the final salute.
Final radio call for Officer Anthony Dia.
For 118, tell this is my family, I love them. I can't copy. 118, tell my family, I love them.
Dispatch to Unit 118. Dispatch to Unit 118, Officer Anthony Dia on all call. Attention all units. Officer Anthony Dia, ID 2755, has answered his last call. Officer Dia was appointed to the Toledo Police Department on July 27, 2018. He answered his final call on July 4, 2020. From the entire family at the Toledo Police Department, Officer Anthony Dia, you and your family will remain in our hearts, thoughts, and prayers. The air is clear.
At this time, all uniformed personnel, please rise, cover, exit, and reform outside.
We bring you back out live to our coverage of the funeral of Officer Anthony Dia. What's happening right now is that all uniformed officers are leaving to reform in a funeral procession next to the burial site at Toledo Memorial Cemetery in Sylvania. A cleric will approach the microphone and lead a final prayer for this service before the family and other close friends. We just witnessed the very emotional final call, or what may be referred to as the end of watch call, that you've heard, something that was much discussed during this funeral, which is Anthony Dia's final words. When he talked to dispatchers and said, "Unit 18, tell my family I love them." And then traditionally, a dispatcher calls out, in this case, to Unit 118. Unit 118 does not respond. There is a second call and then more silence, and that is when the dispatcher acknowledges that this officer has died in the line of duty, and it is the end of watch. Sometimes you'll hear the words, "We'll take it from here." It's a very emotional moment within these ceremonies that deliver the highest honors to the police officers who are killed in the line of duty. You also heard Chief George Krall officially retire Unit 118. That was Officer Anthony Dia's unit number, and that will never again be used by a police officer. You can continue to see police officers and law enforcement, Ohio State Highway Patrol from all over the state, even outside of the state of Ohio, who are filing out of the Savage Arena there at the University of Toledo. They will take their places in this motorcade, which will begin to travel momentarily from Douglas Road over to Monroe Street. It's about 7.3 miles, and it will end up at Toledo Memorial Cemetery. My co-anchor Tim Miller is live outside of Savage Arena. Tim, a very emotional service, one where you don't typically hear from the fallen officer after his death, but of course his friend, his cousin, read a very, very emotional and telling letter written by Anthony Dia himself.
Really hit hard, didn't it, when we heard that letter that Officer Dia had written during Ramadan of this year, which was between late April and late May, so only a couple of months ago. We heard, I believe, a family friend, Mustafa Rahal, reading that letter, basically Anthony Dia's final words. You know, being a police officer, and I'm joined by our friend and colleague Lou Hebert, being a police officer, Lou, you know that this could be your fate. You don't sign up for this. You don't go through the training without understanding that these things could happen. And it could be from an evil person's bullet. It could be from a car accident or rescuing someone from a situation. But he wrote this letter. He wrote it to several family members. And that just really, above maybe everything else, really stood out to me, at least.
Really touched a lot of hearts as he, went through that letter and detailed the thoughts that he was having. And it was just really a couple of months ago that he penned this letter that was really, talked a lot about his family and what he wanted from life and what he wanted for them if he were to pass, to say to his wife, "I hope you live a long life, become a grandmother, and live a long, happy life." I mean, it really exemplified the type of officer that Tony Dia was.
And Melissa, I know you and I take lots of notes for certain events, and I'm sure you wrote some of these down too. This was from that letter. "I pray you go to college, have a family of your own," speaking to his boys. He said to his wife, Jamie, "You're the best wife a man could ask for." And how about this one, Anthony Dia writing just a couple months ago, "I'm sorry that I'm gone sooner than I wanted to be." And then he talked about, "If I am shot in the line of duty, I hope I died with bravery." Melissa, those are takeaways that I think we're all going to remember, anyone who watched this memorial service this morning.
Yes, a lot of that was in my notes, Tim, and really talking to his young boys, that he was so proud of them, and they were so much better, Matham, than I could have ever deserved. So that was a very emotional too. And the boys may be too young to understand all of what's going on. But again, it was really neat to see, as we expected, the mayor and the chief of police saying that now this family has grown by more than 600 officers. Anything that they need, they will have now as members of the Toledo Police Department. And one of the things also, Tim and Lou, that stood out to me is kind of this feeling that his loved ones believe that Officer Dia knew that this could be coming. It talked about that he had a sense that he was leaving soon, and he wrote this letter to tell us to prepare and connect with God. And then the chief, having talked to some family members, shared that those family members said that Officer Dia was the happiest he'd ever been, and they believed it was God's will to take him.
Yeah, in a sense, he was maybe at peace with that, and it was just remarkable when we first heard that letter read. And in my mind, I thought, well, maybe this is something that someone wrote after his death, but he actually wrote these words, Lou.
You know, I would think that there are a lot of, and I don't know this, but, you know, one would wonder, because every officer knows, especially if they're doing that type of duty where they're out on the street and they're interacting with strangers or suspects and people, they have to know in the back of their minds that this is a possibility, a very distinct possibility that could happen. And so one wonders how many other letters remain unread at this point,
right,
and hopefully never have to be read.
And how hard that must have been for him to write that. Of course, Melissa made a good point that, you know, he maybe felt that this was coming, but, you know, it's a letter that you write that you hope your family never ever has to read. But I was thinking as well, what a gift he gave to his family. As hard as it is to hear that in person, you know, that is something, you know, a lot of times we don't have time to say goodbye to our family, and I know they really didn't, other than maybe when he left on July 3rd for his shift to start. But they will always have that, and it will be, you know, encouragement for his boys now, and especially as they grow older and understand things a little bit better. Hey, this is what my dad would have wanted me to do.
You know, and I was also impressed with one comment that the mayor made when he talked about, again, this coming together of police officers, that this family will not just have 600 new brothers and sisters, but also the community, because I really see this sometimes as the community coming together, and again, the thoughts and prayers and everybody's, no matter sort of where you are on the spectrum of how you feel about police reform or those issues, again, this brings it home, and it makes a lot of people understand why these people do what they do, and a lot of us don't, because we don't want to, as Chief Kroll said, walk up to a car with darkened windows in the middle of the night.
Right.
And Mustafa Rahal,
you know,
did add to what Yunus Dia said, who is Anthony's father, that his son, Officer Dia, would not have wanted to die any other way. That he was very proud to be a Toledo police officer. But he did also add, I don't know if you caught it, but we've doing some research back here at the station. He mentioned something called the Anthony rule, and that he's been reading a lot about this, and that basically points to, he was basically telling the mayor and the police chief that there need to be more than one officer in a car. As we know, Officer Dia operated as a single unit, and so he was by himself when he approached this man and was shot and killed. And so that was kind of a call out to Toledo Police Chief George Kroll to provide some more support for police officers and have them each have a partner.
Right, and we do know the chief did suspend that only one person car, but that has been something that I believe has come up before here in Toledo.
Yes, it has.
And you just don't know, Lou, right? You're going up to a scene, you feel I'm checking on someone who is believed to have been drunk. It's dark out. And we also heard at that Home Depot on Alexis Road, he walked towards this suspect and lost sight of him at first because there was, you're outside of a store. There are displays and things like that. So many dangers out there, you just don't know.
Yeah, and you just don't know who that person is and what their intentions may be. And as the chief said, and we're all trying to wrap our heads around, not that they all are many times senseless, but this one just seemed to make no sense whatsoever. As he said, out of the blue. This person didn't seem to indicate apparently that there was any animosity. He was just walking away, and then the gun was pulled.
Funerals are very sad. They're tragic, and I'll continue my thought. Let's listen to this final prayer.
سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
This concludes the service for Officer Dia. Please exit safely.
Okay, that does conclude the service. As you just heard, the body will now be removed by the honor guard and carried out of Savage Arena from the University of Toledo. The processional, which will include hundreds of police officers, maybe even thousands, will make its way up Douglas Road to Monroe Street over to Toledo Memorial Cemetery for a private family burial honoring Islamic traditions. And so we will begin to see that process here on your screen. Guys, the point that I was just getting ready to make is funerals are sad, they're tragic, they're painful, but they're necessary, and each one always gives us a chance to know the person who died much better. And I certainly think that through all of the speakers today, both the bureaucratic speakers and the friends and the religious leaders, that I learned a lot about Officer Anthony Dia. We learned, his friend Mustafa Rahal, his cousin, said that there was always a smile on his face and a kind word. If you were building the perfect cop, it would be Anthony Dia. And then we also heard from the mayor about what a fan he was of the Rams. We heard from the chief about what a great officer he was as well. Clearly, in his own words, we heard what a proud father and husband and son and brother he was. He even put a little bit of humor in that letter saying, "Hey, sister, I don't usually tell you I love you, but I want you to know that." So we really got to see a much broader picture of who this hero was.
You're exactly right, Melissa, and what a moment here at the casket. As moments ago we saw his father kissing the casket, many other family members as well. I wrote this one down. Detective Andre Calla, who wrote that poem near the beginning of the memorial service, he wrote about Officer Anthony Dia. Small in stature, but big at heart, no one could ever replace you. He wasn't the tallest officer you'll ever encounter, but obviously, they felt that he certainly had more stature than his height. And the detective also writing in that poem, "We are now the protectors of his children and wife." Oh, that just, in a service, it was a little over an hour. It had so many moments. It's hard to even get to all of them.
Yeah, it really did. There were, they're always emotional, and I don't care how many times you go to these police funerals. I've been to a number of them, unfortunately, but they always reach down, and this emotion that's somewhere buried in the bottom of our hearts comes right to the surface. And even for the hardest of those people that maybe who aren't inclined to show emotion, it's this brings it and reveals it.
Melissa, another thing we heard a lot, especially the first half of the service, was the two words role model. Not only because of their Muslim faith, they need to follow him as a role model, but in so many ways he was, as an officer, as a husband, as a father. And I think that's something that the family really wanted him to be remembered as, was a martyr and a role model, something that his boys and everyone can really learn from.
Well, and I think too, and there was part of the talk from the imam here, was that You know, when you think of, and talking about him as a role model, when you think of people in the Islamic or the Muslim faith, he said, think of Anthony, think of Tony Dia. And I thought that was a poignant thing to say.
Yes, he was addressing a lot of the, prejudice, frankly, that's come out from certain actions of people in our history, and labeling people like Anthony or just members of our local Toledo Muslim community as bad people. And he said, if you want to see a good Muslim, you look at Anthony Dia.
Right. He was, yeah, definitely a role model for many people, whether policemen for his religion or just, again, as a father and a good citizen.
One of the other things...
And we also...
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
Well, one of the other things I wanted to point out is, obviously there's been a lot of dissension and anger toward police departments lately, and Lieutenant Kelly Leonard, who is the public information officer, and she was kind of the MC for this funeral, she said right off the top, every police officer has felt alone lately, unsupported, targeted, and alone, and we can see here among us that we are not alone, and Anthony has really united people across the world.
Yeah, and in this, as I was saying, in this city, and I think when you look at the stories that have been written, not just in Toledo about Anthony Dia and the officer involved here, but across the state and the region, and so this has been a story that I think you're right, Melissa, brings a lot of people together and a lot of emotion and a lot of thought. We have to step back and we have to think about whatever we believe, reassess that.
And Lieutenant Lenhart really brought this out well in speaking about, police officers, many of them really under the microscope around the country right now. But she brought up a picture that many of us have seen the last few days, was 2 hours before Officer Dia was shot and killed, he met a family at a gas station. He let the boy or the boys sit in his squad car. She mentioned this was the last known picture taken of Anthony Dia. This was just 2 hours before this happened. It just showed the kindness in his heart and how he thought it was important to not only meet the people that he serves. This wasn't a family that was having a problem. He just thought, and it was late at night too, and the kids were out, and he thought, maybe I'll make the kids stay by letting them sit in the squad car.
And he was a dad who had similarly aged kids, and he was out on the job that night. I want to bring in Ariel Onstadt this morning. She is live outside of Savage Arena, perhaps on the other side of the building, kind of watching what's happening outside as this procession will make its way toward Toledo Memorial Cemetery for this private burial. Ariel, we are seeing the casket begin to be moved, and the pallbearers or the honor guard are beginning to take their spots as we are seeing the body of Officer Anthony Dia being removed from Savage Arena. Give us some of your thoughts on this service and some of the people that you've encountered outside of Savage Arena today.
Yeah, Melissa, well, right now I can tell you everyone coming out of Savage Arena has a 10-pound weight on their shoulders, very sad faces, but there are people who have a moment of peace in the closure of laying Anthony to rest later today. They're beginning to make their way out slowly before they'll begin to join that processional taking his body to Toledo Memorial Park. And it will be a slow process getting his casket to its final resting place. Every 7 steps, a prayer will be said to honor him and as he departs. If you look, you can see all of the police cars lined up to support Officer Anthony Dia. They've come miles away from other cities, other states, other departments to lay Anthony Dia to rest. I think it really speaks to what Chief George Crall said when he said you're getting a family of hundreds of snow blowers, leaf cutters, grass cutters, you name it, we will be there for you. And you're seeing an entire community of blue, red, and more come out and say we are here for you and to support you. If you look up on the green embankments, you can actually see different different families coming out despite this sweltering July heat. They want Officer Dia to know how well he is loved. I see some picnic blankets and children, grandmothers, grandfathers, parents, as well as others with their go-karts making it out this morning just to make sure that they know, the Dia family knows how well they are loved and supported through this difficult time. I'm going to be talking with some more officers as they make their way out from different departments, trying to get their feedback. We know that Anthony Dia's body will soon begin to make its journey this way to Toledo Memorial Park. Ultimately, he will be laid to rest in a shroud as family and friends mumble prayers and lay him to rest. I'll send it back to you.
Ariel, we are seeing right now, we just saw the wife of Anthony Dia, Jamie, and her two children, Eunice and Nathan, have made their way outside, and they are watching this casket be escorted by Toledo Police Department members. Ariel touched on the fact that at one point, this casket, per Islamic faith, will be carried by close family of Anthony Dia. Usually it would be the Honor Guard, Toledo Police, who would be serving as pallbearers, but at some point, again, kind of blending the Islamic faith traditions with the Toledo Police traditions, we do believe perhaps when Officer Dia makes his way to Toledo Memorial Cemetery that that may change, and we may see his Muslim family members take over carrying his casket. And you are seeing that loaded into the hearse right now. We understand that there are thousands of people now lined up along the processional route, which again goes on Douglas Road all the way to Monroe Street in Sylvania. So over kind of in Monroe and Haroon, there is where the resting place is, and that is going to be a private service at that point. I understand we have Michelle Backus, who is live along the processional route this morning. You've been on Monroe Street. Michelle, tell us what you're seeing out there as the city of Toledo waits now to pay its final respects to this fallen officer.
Melissa, it's really amazing to see just how many people came out to pay their final respects. And there really is no certain age here. I'm seeing a lot of children here, as well as adults, as well as older people. Everyone said the same thing. They felt as if it was their duty to come out and say thank you to Officer Dia for his service. Take a look right behind me. This family has been set up here for the past hour and a half or so. You can see a lot of American flags. Everybody has brought an American flag or a sign or wore some sort of red, white, and blue here this morning. You can also notice a lot of kids here. I was speaking with a lot of those parents. They said that they want their kids to be a part of this so they can see what this process is like and what it's like to respect your officers here this morning. That is what they told me. And again, everyone right now just wants to pay their respects. Of course, they feel extremely terrible for the Dia family. I'm seeing just a lot of patriotism. Everyone out here is sporting some sort of American flag shirt or something like that. It's hot out, Melissa, right now. You can probably see that sun beating down, but everyone out here does not care. They're simply here to pay their respects to Officer Dia and, of course, his family. Now, organizers wanted you to be here by 11:30. So far, that road is not shut down yet here on Monroe, where I am at, right off of Alexis. There is still time to pay your respects. Again, we're going to see that procession start to come through here within the next half hour or so. So there still is time. Nonetheless, if you do plan on coming out here this morning, I would bring a water bottle as well as other things to cool you off. I expect this road to actually get a little bit busier with people. We're starting to see even more people come in. Again, everyone just wants to pay their respects and ultimately say thank you to Officer Dia for his service. Reporting live, Michelle Backus, WTOL 11.
All right, thanks, Michelle. And it appears we are maybe even ahead of schedule right now. We were a little bit behind with some of the speakers, but now this processional is set to make its way toward the burial site there at Toledo Memorial Cemetery around 12. So we're at 11:41 right now, and the body should arrive at the cemetery around 1 o'clock. So as she said, plenty of time to kind of take your place there along the route. You may see, if you've ever seen some of of these funerals before with the highest honor for a firefighter or a police officer. You may see firefighters maybe put up their ladders and hold a flag there in the middle. This is this is Officer Dia's father holding his grandson, one of the sons of Officer Dia, and it looks like he's just saying hello to some friends and family as we get ready for this hearse to make its way from the University of Toledo. It's about a 7-mile trip. Want to touch base with Tim Miller and Lou Hebert, if you guys are still with me this morning. We just touched base for the first time with Michelle. She had been anticipating seeing people line up, and that's something you know is going to happen if you're familiar with how these unfortunate situations go. It is just, you're never going to find a situation where so many people are out there ready to honor someone like this who died, as he said, he hoped with bravery, and that's certainly what happened here.
Yes, this is Lou, Melissa. Yeah, just watching the scene here, it's very interesting as we're watching everything unfold, and the family, and of course the grandfather with one of the sons there on his shoulder, and just sort of trying to take note of everything that's happening. But you know, I wanted to say, as I watch people talk to the family, and we've talked about how the community will support the family in the future. And you know, this has been, as I've studied some of the police history over the years, I've noted that, you know, at one time there were no police pensions or police insurance policies and things like that in the city, and the community always came together. So often when a police officer in Toledo was shot and killed or died in the line of duty, they left behind families, as this case is, but the city came together and would support. In fact, when I was talking about George Zentera, when he died in 1928, the city came together and paid off the family's mortgage on the home.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and that was not, I think, that was not an unusual circumstance, an unusual situation. That happened numerous times where the local people would come together and help that family for a long time to come.
And do you remember,
Good
too,
point there, Lou.
Danielle
And
Dressel?
Melissa, I'm having trouble hearing you right now, but obviously Lou can. But I just wanted to point out, a lot of these policemen are coming up the hill here, right past us here at Savage Arena. And quite a sight. We have the helicopter up above as they are getting ready to begin this procession. But so much for all of these officers, and of course Toledo firefighters as well, to take home with them. Always remembering Officer Anthony Dia.
I was just going to say, Tim, Danielle Dressel, who is the widow of Keith Dressel, who was killed in 2007, the last Toledo police officer to be killed in the line of duty, she actually went and worked at the Toledo Police Department after his death. So really embraced into that family after his death.
Yes, and his mother, Lorraine, also became very active with the police museum after that as well. As the police museum was started up in about 2010, she became an active member and was again part of that family of police officers, and were embraced by them, and you know, it was a. And you just see that so much with these departments, and it really is. I don't want to say, for lack of a better word, a brotherhood, but there is a bond there that I think is very difficult for people on the outside of the police department to really understand the depths of that and what it means when someone else, you know, when people wear a badge.
And Lou, let me ask you, you've done so much work with the Toledo Police Museum. What do you think will happen to remember Anthony Dia over the years? You had mentioned earlier that family members of past slain officers would come there to learn more. I can only imagine, especially, you know, in today's age, maybe some digital presentations on his life. What are some of the things we might see so that Toledo truly never does forget?
Well, at the museum, for example, they have memorial videos that are available. They have one that I know for Keith, Officer Dressel, Detective Dressel. They have another one for Officer Miss Cannon, plus another video that was done for all of the officers over the years. But there were two very special ones that were done for Officer Biscannon and for Detective Dressel. I'm assuming, I haven't talked with the museum director Shirley Green, but I'm guessing that, you know, based on what has happened in the past, that there will be some type of special memorial or video on Officer Dia's life and his service to the community. So
Sure.
that would be that would be one thing that I would suspect will happen. The other thing that's talking about the museum and talking about the history, Unit 118, which was Anthony Dia's number, there was a badge number worn by an officer in the 1940s, and his badge number was 118. His name was Jacob Chandler. He was a lieutenant he was a patrolman in the Toledo Police Department, and then joined the Army in 1945 during World War II, and he became the only officer who was killed in the line of duty in World War II, the only Toledo police officer. He was African American, one of the few African Americans in the Toledo Police Department, and he wore badge 118. Now there's a little bit of the...
That's why we have you here, Lou, because you have that. I love history, but you certainly have the history of the city down pat.
But he died. He was part of the 92nd Division, what was called the Buffalo Soldiers. He died in Italy in February of 1945, and remains buried there at the Florence American Cemetery. So
yeah, Melissa, 118 is a number I think a lot of us will always remember.
Yes, that's right, because they coincided with Officer Dia's last word, Unit 118, tell my family I love them. Very emotional words to hear, but also very comforting for his family to know that they were first and foremost on his mind as he figured out that he was dying. I want to touch base right now with Kaylee Kirby. She's another one of our reporters stationed along the processional route at Monroe and Douglas this morning, where we do expect this motorcade to pass on through momentarily. Kaylee, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, Melissa, in the last probably 10 or 15 minutes, a huge group of people have now come. They've shut down the corner of Monroe and Douglas. I'm going to have my photographer turn the camera. We've got people holding flags. It's very silent right now. A couple of the words that I've heard with the people I've talked to are emotional, senseless, just things of what they've been feeling over the last 72 hours. We've got a helicopter right above us, so I'm going to assume that the hearse is headed our way. I don't know if you guys can see, but tons of people just standing out here, just showing their support for the family, for Officer Anthony Dia. Earlier this morning, I was out here on the corner and I witnessed the hearse passing me, headed to the University of Toledo. So it's just kind of very emotional for me watching the entire thing, seeing him head to the University of Toledo, and now getting ready to watch him head to the cemetery. So I'll be out here, I'll be talking to people, but a lot of emotions right here, right now. Not much talking, just, pretty much just honoring him and showing their support for him and his family. Melissa?
Yeah, I think what we're all feeling, Kaylee, is just the kindness of strangers, people just who never even met this officer, this young man, who come on out and pay their respects. They don't know him. They just know that they're thankful and that he deserves their respect on this day. Let's touch base right now again with Tim and Lou. So, Lou, you've covered many of these funerals. You know the history that has faced police departments. Civil rights didn't come that long ago. What do you make of this? Just weeks ago, there were huge protests in the city of Toledo. It's been said many times Officer Dia was a fantastic officer. Police are feeling, as Lieutenant Leonard said, alone, unsupported, and targeted. Today, they feel together. They feel united by Officer Dia. What happens next between the police and the community? Everyone is on the same page for today.
Well, you're right, and that's a good question. Yeah, everyone is on the same page, and I suppose it's an opportunity or a time to use that, I guess, that togetherness on this particular moment in time to forge ahead, and so maybe we have some common ground to work with here. Maybe, again, as I said before, maybe there is an understanding now that some people have and are going to be more willing to work together. We can only hope that is where it's going to go from here.
And here's what Mayor Kapsakavich said during his message during the memorial service. Talking that Anthony Dia was loyal, he was loyal to his city. He said, how loyal are we? He kind of put a challenge out to all of us, I think. How much capacity for love is there in our hearts coming from the mayor? So he also sensed, this has been a tough year on many fronts, and this is probably the worst of them all. But the mayor sensed that this is a time that we need to come together. I thought he was pretty forceful talking about, police officers. Do we love them or do we hate them? I think we know the answer to that question when it comes to some people. So I think that was maybe a rallying call or a challenge from Mayor Kapsakavich to appreciate officers more. And some people, might see that in a different way, but that's how the mayor felt today.
Well, and I think he stated it well, and I think there are probably many in the community and community leaders who would agree with that statement, and I think there are police officers, many of them would agree with that. And again, hopefully this can be a moment that is used to forge ahead with something positive and try to find some solutions. And again, make the people who maybe don't have or are inclined to not like police as much or are doubters, to help them come together, to make them understand. Again, I think one of the key points here is that police officers are humans, and they have lives. Right. And Chief Kroll said something that I thought was really important to remember. We expect a lot. The bar is high for police officers. They're expected to be tough, to be brave, to be courageous, and at the same time to be compassionate, kind, and be all of those things to all people. And we have to and Officer Dia, from what we've heard today, was one of those who met that standard.
And he really was. Let's hear right now again from Lieutenant Kelly Leonard about Officer Dia as a police officer and a father.
Anthony was a son, a husband, a daddy, and a police officer. A police officer who had the courage to go where others would not dare, not just on July 4th, but each and every day he took up the badge to protect, to keep people safe, and to do what is right.
And Officer Dia, in his letter to his family, said, if I passed at work, Allah will forgive me and I hope accept me as a martyr. And we are beginning to see this funeral processional honoring Officer Anthony Dia make its way from the University of Toledo Savage Arena over to Toledo Memorial Cemetery in Sylvania, where thousands of people have lined up to pay their respects. And Officer Dia has this funeral giving him the highest honors because he was killed in the line of duty while performing his job. Some of the traditions that you've seen here today represent honor, sacrifice, gratitude, not only from police officers from around the state, but from our community as well. It's a very meaningful send-off. As we've seen a lot today being said, this is going to bond these officers and the Dia family after this terrible tragedy here in our community. But on the other hand, it's also a chance to celebrate this fallen officer's service and his dedication to his community, of which we've heard a lot about today.
Melissa, we really have, and you had mentioned Lieutenant Lenhart. She said during her talk beginning this memorial service to his widow, Jamie, Your husband is a hero, and to the boys, Eunice and Nathan, your daddy is a hero. And we're proud that he wore the patch of this department. So Anthony Dia, Lou, was very proud to be a member of this force. 12 days short of 2 years, so really not a long time. In fact, one of the speakers said today, we wish we only had a short time with him, but this was what he wanted to do. We've heard his father say that. Not only is this the way that he would want to go if he had to go, but this was something that he just wanted to do. He wanted to be a Toledo police officer.
Yeah, I think for many, and I suppose motivations are always different for whatever career someone chooses, but I think many for wanting to be a police officer, like maybe teachers or other professions, it's a calling. Mm-hmm. It really is. It's something you really feel compelled to do, and that's one of the things that I've learned, I think, over the years in talking with many police officers. It's something they just feel like they were compelled to do,
right?
And because they thought, this is not something I don't think you enter into lightly. It's not.
And he chose to do that.
Right.
He chose to be an officer.
Right.
It's only been a couple of years, so he knew the environment. Right. He knew that there were maybe tough times for officers. And a lot of them have been killed in the line of duty all over the country. Remember that one night in Dallas when so many officers were lost in one incident.
Yeah, exactly. And there's but at the same time, he really seemed to be, and everything we've heard today, everything we've read, the type of officer who, and again, 2 hours before he would die in the line of duty, he's out there talking with people and sharing with the children and letting them come into the patrol car and being playing a goodwill ambassador for the city, because this is who he was.
Yeah, I think it's him being
in his car and waited for the next call.
I think it's him being a dad as well. As I said, he was at work, and maybe that was part of him missing his kids. I want to talk too about. He was a young police officer, 26 years old, just under 2 years on the department. And so it seems that this Toledo police detective, Andre Cowell, who wrote this poem about Anthony Dia, that they were friends. So maybe it's this elder detective kind of taking him under his wing. He said that they used to go out for meals together. Let's hear from him about Anthony Dia, his friend.
A role model for our youth, Tony represented a diverse community. I'm sure July 3rd started just like any other work night did. Tony said goodbye to his family, kissing his wife, then kissing his kids. Starting his shift, his badge shining, his uniform crisp and clean, he hit on with the dispatcher. Tony is now Unit 118.
And just another day on the job. And so many families, I see it on social media when these tragedies happen. There's many families who live in fear when their officers, their sons, their husbands, their fathers go to work each and every day.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Lou, you were going to mention, I was just going to say that this was quite the poem. It's not easy to deliver something like this, especially when you're remembering your friend and you see the casket just a few feet away, but they obviously had a strong bond.
Yeah, they did, and obviously he was very inspired from that bond and from what happened, and it was a very heartfelt poem, and I really was very impressed with what he said and the words of that. So.
Yeah, Melissa, I think you put it well just a little short while ago. We came out of this memorial service learning so much more about Officer Anthony Dia, which we expected, but I mean, we got so many details about the type of person that he was, and hearing his own words in that letter that he wrote to his family a couple of months ago in the event of his death. Wow, I don't know, I just can't forget those words in my mind right now.
Yeah, I'm actually...
one of the things that... Oh, no, go ahead. I'm just saying one of the things that I historically, looking back and doing some research on other officers, I think it's only been sort of recently, and maybe it's because of our media, that today we have multimedia and social media, but the responses You know, if you go back to the 1930s or 40s, for example, very often when a police officer died in the line of duty, even in Toledo, while there was a great response at the time, it was more, you didn't find out these things. It wasn't written about the person themselves,
right?
Who they were. A little bit here and there, but I've learned so much more about Officer Dia today, and just the past couple of days reading about him and who he was, than I did of any of these other officers, let's say from 50, 60, 70 years ago.
Right.
You just didn't have that depth, and our coverage today, media, and I think people are maybe more willing to talk about.
And you know, here's a point here. In watching yesterday the news conference that Chief Krall had with Anthony's father, Eunice, this is not a family that is going to walk away from this profession. They are not going to say, we lost a member, we are going to go hide somewhere. They are not. He said, we have other family members, and I think he might have been talking about his kids. I'm not sure. I didn't have a chance to talk to him, but he said, we have others who want to be police officers. And that struck me yesterday, was that this family really believes that this is a way to help people.
Well, obviously, Officer Dia was a very inspirational person.
Yes.
And now that we know even more about him, I think even more so.
And I do just want to let our viewers know that normally you would be seeing our noon newscast right now. We are continuing our coverage of the funeral of Toledo police officer Anthony Dia, who was killed while checking on a person's welfare on Saturday night. He was killed at the Home Depot on Alexis Road, and he is being laid to rest now 3 days later. We were just talking so much about this letter that Officer Dia wrote to his family. He first addressed his eldest son, Eunice. It was a final words, and it was a will to his family. So let's take a listen quickly to that.
Every day I put on the uniform, it was the intention to protect the weak and innocent in my community from evil. I also hoped that if I was shot, I was able to take the shooter with me. I hope I died with bravery.
Wow, that's very brave and poignant words. He didn't mince words there, guys. He said, you know, I hope if I go down, this bad guy goes right along with me.
Yeah, he did fire off several shots.
He did, right, and that's you know, as it played out, the suspect did go down by his own hand.
But it was because of that action that Officer Dia did that maybe, you know, it flushed him out of the situation. It sent him into the woods, because despite being injured, and I'm sure he knew right away this is bad, he had that mentality. I'm going to try to take out this threat.
And if you listen to the 911 dispatch, Officer Dia fired back several times, and within 2 seconds, and I'm not exaggerating, Toledo police were on the scene and soon taking him to Toledo Hospital, where he died. We were talking before this procession got underway, and before we heard the letter, we were talking about kind of the bravery and the pride of Officer Dia. And look, here are some words being flown via a plane here today. Anthony Dia, thank you for your service. That is above kind of this processional route today. That is a very nice tribute. But let's talk more about his father, Eunice, because remarkably, he, in response to a lot of the unrest and a lot of the calls to defund police departments just days ago, literally like 5 days ago, he had a small rally. It was about a dozen people, nothing too big. But Anthony Dia's father had a rally in support of police, coming out very strong in support of police and saying, we have no business defunding police. We will always support police. And I plan to hold even more of these rallies in support of police.
Yeah, Melissa, I think he even also said, I'm kind of a lazy person. At the time, I never thought I'd be someone who would organize a pro-police rally, but he felt strongly about the situation, felt strongly about his son being on the force. And I can remember, Melissa, that morning, I think it was Thursday, we were we were kind of recapping that event being held, and as soon as, I know for myself, as soon as I heard Saturday morning the name Dia, I thought, oh my goodness, his father just had this rally a couple days ago.
That's remarkable. Yeah, that's remarkable, and that would have happened so close on the heels of that. Wow.
Guys, I want to get out to Ariel Onstadt. She is watching as this procession files out of the University of Toledo area. We can see some of those police cars behind you. Ariel, what are you seeing, not only in terms of the procession itself, but the people who are out there to pay their respects?
Melissa, right now it's really overwhelming. It's like a sea of blue and red lights as safety forces are out in full force. Right now I'm seeing Officer Dia's friends and family make their way around Savage Arena, heading down Douglas right now, and the police cruisers will soon follow them, but it's going to take a while because Officer Anthony Dia has so many friends and family who want to show him their love. I've been standing here for about 5, 7, 10 minutes now, 5 to 10 minutes, and I've been seeing multiple cars drive past, and we haven't even gotten to our police cruisers. So you really just see, when you saw how loved he was during his memorial service, you're seeing that live and in person right now. His hearse has left Savage Arena, as we know, and now we're just seeing friends and family make their way out to take him to his final resting place. And I think something that's encouraging when we talk about the community coming together, we are seeing that up here along this embankment, some family members with their flags. I've seen more come and arrive within the past 10 minutes or so, making sure to show their support. I've been hearing them shout some encouraging words and messages, and I think despite the heat, more people are still coming out because they want to be here. So they are saying this is worth it to me to make sure that Anthony Dia's family knows how well they're loved. It is a very, very hot part of the day, but people are undeterred by that. Our safety forces will soon be making their way to Toledo Memorial Park as well as part of that escort. And I think ultimately we're just seeing, as much as Anthony Dia brought people together as a police officer, we're seeing him do that even in death, seeing multiple people brought together by his presence, and multiple people, even though they are so sad and heartbroken by his loss, feeling uplifted by the community coming together to show their support. So if there is any ray of hope, it's that the community's pulling together.
Ariel, I want to stick with you for a moment as we take a live look along Monroe Street. First Alert Horizon drone there, and you can see a huge crowd of people there along the left side of the road as the motorcade makes its way down by the Bolero lanes over there, and pretty much now the route will go along Monroe Street over to Sylvania, about the 7.3 mile route. Ariel, you've done such a great job of keeping on top of the perspective, you know, very clearly in the days following his death, and now as we've watched his funeral. Anthony Dia was a very proud Muslim. He is of the Islamic faith. You have really dug into kind of the blending of the Toledo police traditional funeral and incorporating Officer Dia's very strong faith. Tell us what's going to happen once this very public memorial ends at the cemetery.
Melissa, once this very public memorial ends, Anthony Dia's friends and family will have their private moment to lay him to rest. It will be encouraging, but it will be sad. His friends and family tell me that ultimately all of the cars you see here will make their way along to lay him to his final resting place. But the reality is that his family members will be the ones to lay him to rest. They tell me that every 7 steps they will take a break, put down his body, say a prayer, pick him back up, and repeat. And this is a way to make sure that he is laid to rest properly. This is a way to make sure that his soul goes with God. As one friend told me, she said that this is a way to make sure that he is laid to rest in a proper Islamic way. And one thing to note, even though Anthony Dia has died, his soul lives on. We saw that from the imam at the funeral, who said that he is still with us. And you're hearing the loud roar of the motorcade as they're getting ready to take Anthony Dia to his final resting place. So we will continue to keep you updated as we watch these developments. So encouraging to see our community come together, and especially in the traditions of Anthony Dia's funeral, both the blue of his police community and his Muslim faith community as well.
All right, Ariel, thank you so much. Great work outlining that for us. I want to bring back in Lou and Tim. Boy, that really got me when Ariel explained that ultimately this community will be here for the family, but it is the family that will lay Officer Dia, or Tony as they call him, to rest, as it happens with all of us. We're all humans. Hopefully we have friends and family who are there to do that for us, but it really gets at you because this family, they're the ones, these children, his wife, his parents, who are now without Anthony Dia.
It really is, Melissa, and thinking back and looking back at the memorial service just a short while ago, when you did see the boys, right, so them being held and, you know, consoled, and, you know, maybe they won't remember a whole lot about today, but they seem to be aware of what is going on. And, you know, we're dads too. We understand. We worry about our kids all day long, and how loving that Officer Dia wrote this letter a couple of months ago and included his boys in there. I just keep thinking about the images of the boys and how they might not remember a lot about today, but they'll always have their dad's words.
They'll have those words, they'll have that letter, they'll have, you know, and as I was mentioning before and talking with this one gentleman who was 90 and who went through the same situation at 4 years old, and how through his life that name of his father, even though he didn't really know him, but that was kept alive. That light was always there. And he was still concerned at 90 about his father's tombstone. Something had happened to it.
Wow.
And that's one of the reasons he came to the police museum, was to tell us that his father's tombstone, that he needed to be fixed because there was something that had been broken on it. And he was very concerned at 90 years of age. And so, yeah, they carry that with them all the rest of their lives, I'm sure.
And what a treasure this museum, as we've mentioned this morning, is a place where families can go. And, you know, I encourage other families who maybe don't have that connection but would like to learn more.
Well, you know, and we did have, and when I worked there on a much more regular basis, I would encounter families that would come in, not just from officers who had died in the line of duty, but other officers and family members, and they came in many times to find out more information, because the museum is a repository of a lot of the records, and even arrest records and reports and things like that can be found.
Yeah, we've been saying all morning, just so many different moments, Melissa. We focus on certain ones of them, but you just hope that the family draws strength from them in the days and years to come.
And we've talked a lot about this letter, this gift, really, that Anthony Dia left his children and his wife. And, you know, children at this age, they'll grow up hearing stories, and people will come up to them in the community, and maybe they'll visit the police museum and learn a little bit about their dad, a little bit more. But it can't be said better than in his own words. So let's hear right now from that letter from Anthony Dia.
I'm typing this letter in case one day I do not make it home from work or pass away unexpectedly. If you're reading this, that means I am no longer here. There's so much I want to teach you and your brother, but since you're reading this, I may have not been able to teach you guys all of those things. I'm typing this in the holy month of Ramadan, 2020. This month is a time for reflection, and I've thought a lot about death in this month and being prepared for the end of this journey.
And this letter, as you just heard, Anthony Dia wrote just a few months ago during the holy month of Ramadan. Some people have said during the service that perhaps he had a sense that something was coming, that he was leaving soon, and that this letter was to prepare his loved ones and tell them to connect with God, Allah, as he's referred to in the Islamic faith. And Tim and Lou, the chief had learned from the family that Officer Dia was in a very happy place, happiest he's ever been, and he believes so much in God, and that if something were to happen to him, it really was God's will. And the family has said that as well, that he was happy, and we know that if he is gone, then it's God's will that he be gone. It's hard for all of us to understand and comprehend that when it was such a tragic circumstance.
Right.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
They must have had some peace that, you know, if this does happen, I'll be okay with it. I just want to make sure my family's taken care of.
Right. Well, I think, you know, from judging from what we've heard about Officer Dia, he was that type of person. He had a magnanimous personality. He understood things apparently from a much broader perspective.
Only 26 years old.
Yeah, 26 years old. He was
very
much
wise.
older than his years.
Yes, for sure.
He was very wise. He was a very old man in many old eyes.
And how about when he was addressing his older son and he said, "You're the man of the house now."
Yeah.
Which he's always going to remember that, and he will have that responsibility.
Right.
You know, obviously he's 7 years old at this point, or in that age range, but you can bet that is a challenge that he will take on the rest of his life, take care of his mother and all of his other family members.
You know, and as I watch those young boys with their mother and the look on their faces, obviously some confusion, because they really don't maybe fully understand what's taking place here and what's going to happen, and the fact that you know, their father won't be returning home anytime and walking through the door again of their house. And so it's going to be a long time, this healing process for the family. And those young boys, just their look on their faces is you just want to reach out and hug them.
That is the face of tragedy. And he also, I was talking about this gift of this letter, he also said to his wife, Jamie, live a long and happy life after I am gone. Because you know, a lot of times there's that survivor's guilt that comes out of a tragedy like this.
Sure.
And he felt, I need to take some time to comfort her in case this letter does have to be read someday, and unfortunately it was.
Yeah, yeah. And
so powerful.
Very powerful, very emotional.
The more we talk about this, Melissa, it just really hits me.
Yeah, I know. And like I said, we as a community, we will always remember the sacrifice, and we are grateful, but ultimately it's this family that is lost to such a huge piece of their everyday lives. And listen, a lot of people don't have good dads. These children can say that their dad was a hero. They truly, truly can, and say that he was so brave for the city of Toledo. And you know, he always had a smile on his face, and that's exactly what some of his fellow police officers said. Do we have Michelle Backus still along the parade route? She is ready to talk with us right now. And Michelle, we do believe that this processional will be making its way toward you in the next several moments. The last time we talked with you, we had seen some people kind of setting up outside of the sun best they could. What are you seeing out there right now?
Melissa, anticipation is high. There's a really good energy here this morning of people just wanting to be there for Officer Dia and his family. If you take a look right behind me, these crowds have actually grown since the last time I spoke with you. People are now lining the sidewalk. Before, they were sitting in their chairs. They want to make sure they can get the best view possible and obviously pay their respects to Officer Dia and his family. If you take a look across the street as well, you can see a lot of people lined up there. That's just recently filled up, and I'd say the past 15 minutes or so. Really impressive scene here. You might see those American flags waving in the wind. A lot of people wearing red, white, and blue. I was speaking with a lot of families here this morning. You might notice there are a lot of kids here. Families said that they want their kids to be a part of this process and see the sacrifice that Officer Dia made. They want them to understand what's happening here this morning. I was speaking with one family. They said that they have a lot of family that are law enforcement, and they said that this could be them. This could be them next. That's why it's so important to stand up for the community and, of course, support Officer Dia. Something else really astounding here, though, Melissa, is the fact that most of these people that I've spoken with here this morning have never said a word to Officer Dia. They don't know him personally, but they do know him as a police officer here in the community. They know exactly what he did with his career, and they know the sacrifice that he made for the city. You can see anticipation is pretty high here. A lot of people are getting back on the street. Let's see what's going on here. I'm starting to see the red and blue lights. We might start to see that motorcade come here within the next minute or so. So make sure to check back with us as we do watch that come through here. Reporting live, Michelle Backus, WTOL 11.
Okay, I want to touch base right now with Kaylee Kirby, who is also along the processional route over at Monroe and Douglas. Kaylee, what are you seeing?
Yeah, Melissa, right now I'm seeing a lot of police cars. I don't know if you can hear it behind me, but sirens just going off. Sylvania Township, we've got Toledo, Lucas County Port Authority, Cuyahoga Falls. We've got tons of police cars. I think in the last couple of minutes, I've seen maybe 100 just going in one line, going up Douglas, turning left on Monroe. I don't know if you guys can hear me at all. I'm going to stay silent for just a second. We've got police officers saluting. It's a very emotional time right now.
And you are hearing those sounds of that processional as it makes its way over there by the University of Toledo at Douglas and Monroe Street. Obviously hard for you to hear Kaylee right now. We do want to hear once again from the message by Syed Al-Zawini.
We're gathered here to commemorate the life of a man who sacrificed his life and gave the ultimate sacrifice on the 4th of July, the day Americans celebrate America and the liberty and everything it stands for.
And you are seeing us as Americans doing what we do. The police officers are out there celebrating the life and the sacrifice of Officer Anthony Dia. And we've got Kaylee mentioned officers out there from Sylvania Township, officers from Cuyahoga Falls, which is over in the Cleveland areas. Again, Anthony Dia is awarded the highest honors. He was killed in the line of duty while performing his job, and so he does qualify for this type of police funeral and this traditional funeral, far more official than any typical funeral you might see. This is a time when police officers are coming from all over the state and even from various parts of the country to show their honor, their gratitude, and to thank Officer Dia for his service. It's a really meaningful send-off, which will end the police portion of it when they arrive at Toledo Memorial Cemetery there in Sylvania. This is a bonding moment for these officers. Really, nobody knows what they put on the line every day except for they themselves. And as Lieutenant Leonard had said at the beginning of this service, every police officer has felt alone lately, unsupported, targeted, alone, and this is a time where they are not alone. This is one day where they can come together, and they believe that Officer Dia has now united people from across the world. We do know that he did have family across the world, maybe some that he never met, who have been touched by his sacrifice and this tragedy. So it's really a chance also to celebrate this fallen officer's service and the dedication to his community. Obviously, thousands of police cars in this motorcade. This is still alive outside of the University of Toledo. And so while we're seeing this motorcade make its way over now to Monroe Street, headed toward the burial site there at the cemetery, many officers still haven't left the University of Toledo. So that just lets you know how large of a ceremony and a processional we have here. Want to hear now from the mayor, Wade Kapsakavich, who talked about the young officer that Anthony Dia was. Okay, we are working on getting that sound in to our system, and we will share that with you in just a bit. Let's touch base once again with Lou and with Tim. We've seen thousands, I think, of police officers. Do you remember, Lou and Tim, how this compares to the last time Toledo lost an officer, Keith Dressel? I know the Islamic faith portion of the ceremony has played a large role, and obviously that wasn't the case with Detective Dressel, but he was killed in the line of duty. Any similarities or differences that stand out to you today?
Yeah, I think, Melissa, I had just arrived in Toledo a couple of weeks before Detective Dressel was killed, so this was an early way for me to learn how the people in this community came together. I think this processional right here, Lou, reminds me a lot of Detective Dressel's procession as well. I could be wrong here. I think it was up Lewis Avenue in that area, up Jackman perhaps, up into Michigan. I think it was into Lambertville, where at least the service was. Right. And just seeing the long parade of cars and all the officers coming out, it was quite uplifting.
Oh yeah, and of course we continue to honor Keith Dressel with the annual Keith Dressel motorcycle run. Right, exactly, and that always brings out thousands of people and entries into that, and of course just watching here and looking at this line of cars, and as we're sitting here yet over at Savage Hall, and yes, there's still quite a line of cars
they're waiting
that are waiting to join this. So you're right, Melissa. This is going to be a very long line on this processional, and they've come from all over the country to pay their respects.
And this also makes me think of 6 years ago when we lost our two firefighters. The service the memorial was downtown at the Seagate Center, and a little more cramped down there, so maybe you didn't get to see the vehicles all together. But I can remember a friend of mine is a firefighter in Erie, Pennsylvania, where I used to live, and they got in the vehicle with a few of his firefighter buddies, and they came to the funeral, and they just felt they needed to represent their departments and honor a fallen brother. So there's some similarities too from 6 years ago when those firefighters died in fighting that fire.
I think a big difference, you guys, in this case is that there's no criminal to prosecute. You had Ray Abu Arab, who was responsible for setting that arson for the Toledo firefighters, and then you had Robert Jobe, who was, 15 years old. I had, similar to you, just moved here a few weeks after Detective Dressel was killed, but I remember very specifically that, he was just a teenager at the time, and he's still serving time for killing Detective Dressel. That's not going to be the case. There's really no justice here for this incident.
Yeah, and this is not similar, but we had, when Officer William Miscannon was killed in 1970, the suspect in that case was a man by the name of John McClellan. I ended up covering, the first trial was hung jury, and then the second one. And I remember covering both trials. That was in the early 70s. And that took a long time to play out. Right. And of course, he was never convicted for that. And of course, his family spent really a lifetime. His one daughter, Diane Miscannon, who just passed away recently, but she spent a long time just always trying to find justice for her dad.
Right. And in this case, as Melissa mentioned, there will be no trial. Right. Sometimes that saves a family from reliving what they're going through. Sometimes families may think there is no justice. The person took their own life. They were never called to question. They were never asked, why did you do this? And maybe there'll be that feeling we didn't get any answers. Other than this was a person they believe was under the influence, and Officer Dia had gone to check on his welfare. He wasn't, even chasing him down at the moment, and this tragedy happened. So, unfortunately, maybe, Melissa, the family won't get the answers that they had hoped for.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the remarks about Officer Dia as a police officer. Let's hear now from the mayor of Toledo, Wade Kapsakevich.
Anthony Dia was not a police officer for 30 years who became a police officer in a different time, in a different era, where police officers were looked upon differently, and I might say perhaps with more respect than they are now. He was an officer just in the last 2 years. In other words, he chose to be a police officer knowing the environment that police officers face. He chose it willingly. He knew what's going on in this country, and he chose to do it anyhow.
A very proud and brave police officer. That's how Officer Anthony Dia has been described to us today. We've talked a lot about his commitment to the Toledo Police Department, his family's commitment to him being a police officer, and we are seeing thousands of law enforcement in this motorcade as it makes its way toward his final resting place in Sylvania. Let's touch base once again with Ariel Onsad, who is live just outside where the processional route began, which is over there on Douglas and Monroe Street. Ariel.
Yeah, Melissa, right now cars are filtering out. We're seeing the last line of our safety forces make their way into that motorcade. There were 3 lines of cars, and now we are down to the last one. So this motorcade will be arriving at Toledo Memorial Park shortly, one way to pay tribute to Officer Anthony Dia's memory. And I think one thing we've been hearing over and over from friends and family members, as well as our Toledo Police Department today, is how well he exemplified being a member of the Toledo Police Department, how well he wore the badge as an officer. And we've been seeing fire trucks. We're seeing now City of Toledo vehicles, as well as Toledo police officers in their own personal vehicles now, making their way to support Anthony Dia and his family. His family tells me, as well as his friends, and you heard this said during his ceremony, he was a true shaheed, which in Islamic faith means a martyr. And it's a high honor to do this, sacrificing yourself for your faith, your family. It's an honorable position, and it's one that our community has said, Anthony Dia, you exemplify this. So right now we're seeing the last line of cars leave us right here along Douglas near Monroe, and not far from Savage Arena. This area is right where the motorcade began, and the last line of cars are beginning to make their way. It was very extensive, 3 lines of safety forces as well as personal vehicles that you see now all stacked up behind. So the personal vehicles you see now are Toledo police officers making their ways in their own personal vehicles. The motorcade started off with Anthony Dia's friends and family members, then went to marked safety forces, Toledo Police, Toledo Fire, as well as Wauseon Fire and surrounding departments that came to show their support and pay tribute. Now down to the last cars that will be arriving at Toledo Memorial Park. And once they get there, it will be a very special way to pay tribute to Anthony Dia as they lay him to rest. It will be a private service as his family says goodbye. They will take a few steps, lower his casket, say prayers, pick it up, say some prayers, lower his casket, and repeat this process all the way until he is laid to rest. He will be buried in a simple shroud. His friends and family tell me he may have died, but his soul has moved on, and it is very much alive and still with us today. They will honor his life, his memory, and his soul with everything they do from here on after. Melissa.
All right, Ariel, thank you so much. And even though in his own words, Anthony Dia said that he hoped Allah will forgive his sins and accept him as a martyr, it really doesn't make it much easier for those here to accept his death. And one of those people is Toledo's Police Chief George Krall, who, as a very senior member of the Toledo Police Department and one that leads hundreds of police officers, had to see one of his very young officers die in the line of duty. So let's hear from Toledo Police Chief George Krall now.
And my friends, this was not supposed to happen here. A family is devastated. A city is hurting. My police department is hurting. And we're all trying to understand the whys of this senseless murder.
And as we just mentioned previously, we may never know why, because the man who murdered Officer Dia is dead, and he will not face his day in court. Officer Dia, a very young officer. He had just been with the Toledo Police Department for under 2 years, but he did join us at a time, as the mayor explained, that is very difficult to be a Toledo police officer or a police officer in any city for that matter, but he knew what he was getting into, and his family says he was very proud. Let's touch base right now with Michelle Backus. I wonder if people are talking with you about that, Michelle. This was a young officer, difficult time to be in law enforcement, and this young father, 2 little boys, ended up giving his life that night very unexpectedly.
26 years old, and he's a father of 2. It's something a lot of people here within the community have related to. They said that that could be my dad, my husband, out in the line of duty, just trying to protect the city. So it's something that a lot of people feel very close to here today, even if they never knew Dia. A lot of people that I've spoken with along this route said that they have someone in law enforcement, and they want to ensure that the Dia family feels together and they feel like they have a community behind them here this morning. Just take a look at how astounding this is right now. You can really see how the community is coming together. You're seeing a lot of these flags waving in the air as this motorcade passes through here on Monroe Street. Melissa, not a single person has said a word since this motorcade has started from where I am at right now. Everyone is just watching this motorcade. They're waving their flags, showing their support as it passes through. Now, I've been watching a lot of people inside of the vehicles passing through here. A lot of people have been saying thank you with their hands, mouthing it, videotaping what's happening here this morning, because it really is astonishing to see how much the community has come together, especially from this point. You're watching right now some more police officers come up. It is a sea of red and blue from where we are at. Some people are still flashing those lights, as you can see, honking horns, waving. Again, this really means a lot to Officer Dia's family, as well as the other Toledo police officers. You can see that just by how emotional of a setting this is. Even the children, Melissa, are not running around here. They're just watching this motorcade pass by in astonishment. A lot of families said that they do want to bring their children here to see what is happening this morning. Take a look. This really is an impressive sight you're seeing with all of the motorcycles passing by right here. You can see this is actually a Detroit police officer on a motorcycle that just passed by here. Ann Arbor Police, Dayton Police. It only continues and continues from what I am seeing. I actually just got goosebumps from seeing the amount of police officers that are here from different cities. Everyone drove to Toledo to show their support for Officer Dia and, of course, for his family. This is one last chance to pay your respects to Officer Dia's family here this morning. And the community turnout is nothing short of astounding. You can see just how many people are lining these streets. Even looking down, I can see red, white, and blue flags all the way down Monroe Street here, and even going in the opposite direction, Melissa, you can still see those red, white, and blue flags, people waving them, showing their support for Officer Anthony Dia. And of course, with this, Dia's father had actually said that he appreciates all of that support. He wants to see it coming. This is a great way for many people to pay their respects. A lot of people said that they didn't even know Dia, but they knew about what he did, the sacrifice that he made for the city, and he was a hero to them. We've been hearing that word a lot this morning, hero, as we've heard it during his funeral, as well as from a lot of the community out here this morning. So this really is an emotional situation we're seeing here. We're seeing the Ohio State University Police actually pass us right now. It really is astounding to see just how many different police forces are here this morning to pay tribute to Officer Anthony Dia. And again, I have not heard too many people talk here this morning. A lot of people are just standing in awe, giving nods to the people in the motorcade. Of course, they're nodding back, videotaping this experience and saying thank you for being here to pay your respects. Back to you in the studio, Melissa.
Ultimate form of respect from many total strangers. And if you're familiar with that area, Michelle is stationed right by Dave White, which is over kind of on Monroe Street and Alexis, and that motorcade should be making its way right inside of Toledo Memorial Cemetery any moment now. I want to bring back in Tim and Lou. You know, guys, I actually had the opportunity to participate as a member of the media in a motorcade, unfortunately, for a Marine in my first market in Indiana. And it was very intimidating to be amongst the family during this very sensitive and private time. But being able to see on that other perspective, be in this motorcade and make your way to a very gut-wrenching moment, which is when they will lay Officer Dia to rest. But before that, you see thousands and thousands of people waving those American flags. I was no family member, but you feel this appreciation and it kind of takes you to your knees, because these are strangers that are reaching out so lovingly, taking part of their day just to show this family some thanks.
Yeah, certainly something you never forgot, Melissa, and we're glad you're able to share that with us. But, you know, this is a time where the family's gaining strength from this, but we can't forget the pain that they're going through. I mean, you talk about adrenaline and just kind of, you know, get through that funeral, and then the really tough times are coming later. But they have to be feeling some strength in this. I was thinking myself, you know, he passed away. He was killed on the 4th of July. And today we are seeing all these people holding American flags and waving them. And like Melissa said, don't even know the man.
And when you look at this demonstration of people out there lining the sidewalks, I mean, it really does have to give you faith that, quite frankly, Toledo cares. This community cares about police officers, and it's a real demonstration of that. I think heartfelt. We're really a very small town. You know, people talk about Toledo being a city, and always has been a city, but it really is it's a big small town in
small
many
town
ways.
feel, that's for sure.
It does. It has. We have a great connection with everybody. If you've grown up around here, and most people who live here have, you know, we are a community here, and and we do care. I've seen that so many times over and over again in the life I've lived here and my experiences, and to see this today, I just further think it exemplifies that.
And just watching here, you can see as we're showing the motorcade route there, these officers are rolling down their windows and waving and saying thank you, because they feel this connection with the people who have come out and are waving those flags, and you know, they appreciate seeing that, maybe not only just for Officer Dia, but for themselves as well.
Right. You know, and talking about the family too, and while they're going through I mean, I got to believe that you know, the situation is they're probably still stunned.
Stunned. Oh, it is only a few days ago. Yeah.
It's kind of the first few days. Sometimes you're having been through that myself with personal situations. You know, you're not even quite there yet. You know, and everything sets in later, when all of a sudden the house is quiet and the person
and all the families are gone that came out.
Exactly.
But we've talked a lot this morning about the 600 officers or so that will now kind of adopt this family in a sense, the Dia family. And I just hope that they don't forget that, because they are going to be there, and those boys, every time maybe they come to talk about their dad, or as Chief Mike Navarre in Oregon was telling me earlier this morning, they may name some things after Officer Dia. The family will be there for those moments, and I'm sure those boys they'll get more hugs than boys usually like to get.
They'll be well taken care of by many fathers and mothers who wear blue.
And this is how it should be, because you know, they will grow up now without a father, and it was poignant to also see their grandfather, Anthony's father, holding them at the end of the service there. So Melissa, this family that they are a part of, even more so, we hope will propel them in the days ahead and years ahead.
And his boys and his wife were certainly on Officer Dia's mind a few months ago when he wrote this letter that no one saw coming, that was shared this morning at the funeral service. We have a little bit of an excerpt from that letter read by Mustafa Rahal.
My wife, Jamie, we have been through so much together. You were the best wife a man could ask for. Always supporting me in all the things. You never asked for much, but in return you gave your all to myself and our children. You are truly the love of my life, and I know I did not tell you that as much as I probably should have. I apologize for my shortcomings and hope you forgive me. Please continue to raise our children on the right path. We may not be perfect, but I don't think we're doing too bad. I hope you can be happy in this dunya. I hope you get to become a grandmother and live a long, happy life after I am gone.
And I know that was very difficult for Jamie Dia to hear. You could see her crying into her son as she held him, hearing those words. We don't know if it was the first time she heard those words, but very difficult nonetheless. Our coverage continues for the next 15 minutes or so as this motorcade makes its way over to Toledo Memorial Cemetery, which will be the final resting place there in Sylvania of Officer Anthony Dia. There are thousands of people that have shown up to pay their respects on this very hot July day. And it's a long motorcade to stand through, but boy, are they actually paying such deep respect for this officer and his family right now. Given the highest honors right now, Officer Dia was killed in the line of duty on Saturday night. He was just showing up to check on a guy over at the Home Depot. There was a car show there at the time in the late evening hours, early morning hours of Saturday. And he really had no reason to believe that he would be in any significant danger. And there is where he lost his life. And so now he is awarded these full highest honors with this police funeral. And once they get to the cemetery there in Sylvania, the family will take over from there and lay the officer to rest. This is pictures from Main Street here in downtown Sylvania. I'm very familiar with the area, and we are beginning to see the first of the cars come through. We have something special for you right now I want to share with you. It is some condolences from the community.
In moments of fear, danger, or despair, society turns to its heroes. Heroes like 26-year-old Anthony Dia.
He was checking to make sure that this man was okay.
A man whose job was to serve his community. A man whose life revolved around family. A man whose mission cost him everything.
That child did not deserve to die like that.
When a hero leaves us, it's only natural to sit in awe of the gaping void that remains.
A great kid. He was just a great young man. He was a great father. He's a great son, great brother.
A void that takes the strength and courage of an entire community to fill.
The Toledo Fire and Rescue Department wants our brothers and sisters of TPD to know that our hearts and our prayers are with them.
Together, we pray. Together, we search for strength and use it to support those who need it most. Together, we acknowledge true tragedy.
Today, our family is in mourning due to the loss of one of our family members.
So on this day, when nobody short of a hero can take away a community's pain,
Unit 118, you're clear to 40. Rest in peace, sir.
we remember Officer Anthony Dia. Fallen, but never forgotten.
And his death in the line of service will go down in Toledo history as well as those before him. If you would like to share your respects, your comments, your comfort with the Dia family or the Toledo Police Department or just with fellow Toledoans, just text us those words at 419-248-1100. You can also text the word officer to the same number and we will send you the stories that we've done thus far on Officer Anthony Dia. As this funeral procession makes its way into Sylvania over to the cemetery, Toledo Memorial Cemetery, where Officer Dia will be laid to rest, Michelle Backus is there just around the corner. Michelle.
Melissa, you're starting to see this motorcade slow down here behind me. That's ultimately because we're just under a mile from Toledo Memorial Park, so you're seeing some of those cars turn in there. It's slowing down traffic. Nonetheless, the spirit of the people around here has continued. I told you earlier, I haven't really heard anyone talk since this motorcade started. A lot of people are just waving their flags in awe. Even the children are watching as this motorcade passes by, not really causing a commotion or anything anything like that. Take a look right behind me. I want you to see just how much support Officer Dia has here today. You can see a line of red and blue lights coming down Monroe Street. The amount of police officers from different cities here is also pretty astounding. I was seeing police officers from Detroit as well as Dayton and Cleveland, as well as other areas coming here today to show their respect for Officer Dia. You can also see a lot of flags waving here down Monroe Street. Almost every single person brought a flag here this morning. They're waving it as the cars pass by. A lot of the people standing on the streets are making eye contact with the people inside of the vehicles in the motorcade, and it seems as if it's a silent thank you, making that eye contact, saying thank you for being here, thank you for supporting Anthony Dia and his family during this tragic time. It really is busy here. These streets have only gotten busier, especially within the past hour, and you're starting to see that traffic slow down. The lights are still going, however. Again, we're just about under a mile from Toledo Memorial Park, where the funeral service will be, or where his burial will be. So again, you're just starting to see that slow down here as people are turning into there. Some people said this morning that they have a sibling, a father, a friend in law enforcement, and they wanted to come out and show their respects. Other people simply said that it's the right thing to do. They said that they wanted to come out and support the Dia family and thank him for his service here to the city of Toledo. You can see it's not only the city of Toledo that is mourning Officer Dia here. There are people from all over the state, a lot of people watching that live broadcast as well. It really is a moving experience here. It's something so tragic, and Officer Dia's father had said he appreciates the support, the love he's seen so far from the community. He said this is a difficult situation, but obviously it does help with everything, and you're just seeing that community support here this morning. I'm actually watching some people hug. A really emotional situation from what I'm seeing. You might not be able to see it through the crowd of people, but I'm just feeling a sense of togetherness, Melissa. It really is a sense of community here this morning between all of the different police officers, everyone that is paying their respects, everyone waving their flags, even children coming out here this morning to say thank you to Officer Dia and pay their respects to the family. You can see this motorcade is still slowed down here right now. A lot of people had their phones out in the motorcade, just taking it all in, seeing just how many people were out here today to say thank you to Officer Dia. This is one last time to do it here for his family in person at this point, so you can see just how many people wanted to ensure that they were able to come out and say thank you. Back to you in the studio, Melissa.
All right, Michelle, and I think what you're feeling and what you're seeing is the respect that is much deserved for Officer Anthony Dia. And this was a son and a father and a husband. He called his parents in the letter that he wrote the best parents he could ever ask for. He thanked his sons and said that they made him a better person. And so this family now, it is their chance here in just a few minutes to lay Anthony Dia to them, Anthony or Tony, to rest at his final resting place, Toledo Memorial Cemetery there in Sylvania. The officers will let the family be the pallbearers and the close friends, and they will have an Islamic burial ceremony out there in Sylvania. And so you'll see a lot of the police presence begin to step away, but we're already really starting to see more community effort. Remembrances and fundraisers continue throughout the area for Officer Dia and the Toledo Police Department as well. Lou's talked a lot about the Toledo Police Museum. I want to bring the two of you in, Lou Hebert and Tim Miller, one more time. We have just a few more minutes here before this community remembrance and public show of respect takes on to the family here at the burial today. So just maybe some final thoughts from you both.
Well, my final thought is that, you know, at watching this community come together and watching what we've witnessed for the last couple of hours here for this ceremony and the processional to
I don't think we can hear Lou. Can we hear Tim?
Okay. Yeah,
All right,
Lou
I'm
was
gonna give
just
them a
talking
minute
about, you know,
to
we
get their audio together. But let's just recap what we saw here today at Savage Arena. It is a final send-off and a very momentous occasion for the city of Toledo as we remember Officer Anthony Dia, who was killed just 3 short days ago on July 4th. And we are seeing the memorial make its way. If you know the Sylvania area, this is Monroe Street. Olivet Church is on the right. There are some former ProMedica offices on the left, and as you get up there to where you can see the end of that ambulance, that is where Monroe Street intersects with Alexis Road, and you'll continue on to Monroe Street, and Toledo Memorial Cemetery is there on the right. This is a picture of just 26-year-old Officer Anthony Dia. He'd just been with the Toledo Police Department for under 2 years, and one of the final pictures there with some children that he had met the night that he was killed, just a couple hours before, and perhaps him with his own children there. Some pictures of him as a proud Toledo police officer. He completes his watch receiving the highest honors possible, someone who has given their life serving our community. A meaningful send-off for this police officer and his family after an unspeakable tragedy, a chance to celebrate this fallen officer, his service, and his dedication to his community. We would like to thank you so much for joining us for our special coverage of the funeral of Officer Anthony Dia. You can join us tonight at 5, 6, 10, and 11, and we will continue to bring you the sights and sounds of this day, which will go down in Toledo history. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hurt on the job? Ohio's workers' compensation laws can be complicated. Don't make a mistake that may cost you thousands of dollars in benefits. If you've been hurt on the job,